The stars had always been silent. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They built telescopes that could see billions of light years away. They searched and found nothing. Then, on a cold morning in January 2147, the silence ended. The signal came from beyond Neptune. It was not random noise. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message, repeating over and over in mathematical patterns that no human had created. Within hours, the greatest minds on Earth had decoded its meaning. Someone was coming. The United Earth Council gathered in Geneva 3 days later. Presidents and prime ministers sat around a massive circular table. Generals stood against the walls with their arms crossed. Scientists clutched tablets filled with data they barely understood. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of air recyclers. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the head of the table. She was 60 years old with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands trembled slightly as she held the translated message. "They call themselves the Hegemony," she said. "A coalition of 12 alien species. They have controlled this region of the galaxy for 60,000 years. She paused to let that number sink in. 60,000 years. Human civilization was barely 10,000 years old. These beings had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. They will arrive in our solar system in approximately 6 months. They are sending an ambassador to discuss." She looked down at the paper. "Integration. Integration?" asked the President of the United States. "What does that mean? We don't know yet. But based on the tone of the message, I don't think it means friendship." She was right. The Hegemony ship arrived exactly when they said it would. It was enormous, nearly 3 kilometers long, shaped like a curved blade made of black metal. It stopped just beyond the orbit of Mars and broadcast a signal requesting communication. The world watched as the first video link between humanity and alien life was established. Billions of people stared at their screens, holding their breath, waiting to see what the universe had sent them. Ambassador HFY appeared on the screen, and humanity got its first look at their visitors. He was tall, perhaps 2.5 meters, with skin like gray leather stretched over sharp bones. His eyes were large and completely black, reflecting no light. His mouth was a thin line filled with small pointed teeth. Behind him stood 2 guards of the same species, holding weapons that pulsed with blue light. "People of Earth," HFY said. His voice was deep and cold. "The Hegemony greets you." Secretary General Santos sat in front of the camera, representing all of humanity. She kept her face calm even though her heart was pounding. "Ambassador HFY, on behalf of Earth, I welcome you. We have many questions, and hope this can be the beginning of a peaceful relationship between our peoples." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. It was not a pleasant sound. "Peaceful? Yes. The Hegemony always prefers peace." He leaned forward. "Let me explain your situation, Secretary General. You are a young species on a small planet in an unremarkable solar system. You have achieved basic space travel, but you have no faster-than-light capability. You have no weapons that could threaten even the smallest Hegemony patrol ship. You are, in the language of our coalition, pre-developmental." Santos felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "We may be young, but we have accomplished much. We would prefer to be treated as equals." "Equals?" This time the laughter was clearer. The guards behind HFY joined in. "The Hegemony has conquered over 300 species. We have ruled this part of the galaxy since before your ancestors climbed down from trees. You are not our equals. You are not even close to our equals." The transmission was being broadcast worldwide. Billions of people watched as their entire species was insulted and dismissed. "Then what do you want from us?" Santos asked. HFY smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "The Hegemony offers you integration. Your planet will become a production world. Your people will serve in our labor caste. Your resources will fuel our expansion. In exchange, you will receive protection and guidance. You will learn your proper place in the galaxy. And if we refuse," the alien spread his hands. "No one refuses the Hegemony. The last species that tried was erased from existence 14,000 years ago. We do not even remember their name." He paused. "You have 30 of your days to prepare for integration. Dismantle your military forces. Surrender your orbital stations. Prepare your population for work assignments. When we return, we expect full compliance." And if we don't comply? Keth Voran's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. Then, we will make an example of your world. We will reduce your cities to ash. We will sell your survivors to the labor markets of a dozen worlds. And we will use Earth as a warning to any other species that thinks they can resist the hegemony. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one in the council chamber spoke. Then, slowly, the shouting began. The next 30 days were chaos. Some governments wanted to surrender immediately. They argued that humanity had no chance against a civilization that had existed for 60,000 years. Better to survive as slaves than die as free people. Others wanted to fight, even though they knew it was hopeless. They pointed to human history, to all the times people had stood against impossible odds. Sometimes courage mattered more than numbers. Most people were simply afraid. They held their families close and watched the sky, waiting for the alien ships to return. The United Earth Council met every day, arguing and debating and accomplishing nothing. The military prepared what defenses they could, but everyone knew it was pointless. Earth had a few hundred warships designed to patrol the solar system and handle small threats. The hegemony had conquered 300 species. It was like an ant preparing to fight a giant. On the 20th day, a message arrived requesting an emergency meeting. It came not from any government, but from a source that surprised everyone. The Deep Space Command, humanity's military arm for operations beyond Earth orbit. Fleet Admiral Helena Vance arrived in Geneva that evening. She was 63 years old with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years, commanding everything from patrol boats to battle cruisers. She was known for two things. She never lost a battle, and she never showed fear. She walked into the council chamber alone, carrying nothing but a small tablet. The world leaders stared at her with a mixture of hope and despair. Admiral Vance, Secretary General Santos said, "We were not expecting you. Is there a problem with our defense preparations?" Vance looked around the room slowly, meeting every pair of eyes. "There is no problem. There is an opportunity." "An opportunity?" The Russian president shook his head. "What opportunity? We have seen the size of their ship. We have heard what they did to other species. We have no opportunity." Vance set her tablet on the table. 47 years ago, when I was a young lieutenant, I was assigned to a classified project. I was told that it was the most important work in human history. I was told that I could never speak of it to anyone. I was told that the fate of our species might one day depend on it. She pressed a button on the tablet. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing something that made everyone in the room gasp. Ships. Thousands of ships. Hidden in asteroid fields. Buried beneath the surface of moons. Concealed in the darkness between planets. Ships unlike anything Earth had ever publicly revealed. Ships bristling with weapons that seemed to defy physics. Ships that looked like they had been designed for one purpose. War. "This is Project Consequence," Vance said. "For nearly 50 years, the governments of Earth have been preparing for exactly this scenario. We knew, based on statistical analysis, that contact with hostile aliens was not just possible but likely. We decided to prepare." The council members stared at the display in shock. "How? How is this possible?" the Chinese president asked. "The budgets, the manpower, the technology. We would have noticed. You noticed exactly what we wanted you to notice. Every black budget item, every unexplained expense, every scientist who disappeared into classified work, it all fed into this project." Vance smiled grimly. "Humanity has been preparing for invasion for half a century. We have ships, we have weapons, we have soldiers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. But can we win?" Santos asked. "They have conquered 300 species. They have 60,000 years of experience." Vance's smile faded. "I cannot promise victory, but I can promise that we will not go quietly. I can promise that we will make them pay for every inch of space they try to take. And I can promise them something else." She looked up at the holographic display, at the hidden fleet that represented humanity's determination to survive. "I can promise them consequences." 5 days before the deadline, Earth broadcast a message into space. It was sent on every frequency, in every language the hegemony was known to use. It was short and simple. "The Sol system is sovereign human territory. Cross the heliosphere with hostile intent, and you will not return. This is Earth's final warning." Ambassador Keth Voran received the message on his ship, still waiting beyond Mars. He read it twice, then showed it to his subordinates. They laughed until their sides hurt. "They threaten us," one of his aides said, wiping tears of amusement from his eyes. "A species that cannot even leave their own system threatens the hegemony. They are prey animals trying to roar like predators," another added. "It would be sad if it were not so funny." Keth Voran forwarded the message to the Hegemony High Council, along with his recommendation. "The humans have rejected integration. They have issued threats. I recommend we make an example of them. Send the Third Conquest Fleet. Destroy their military capabilities and enslave the survivors. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy us." The High Council agreed. The Third Conquest Fleet was mobilized. 400 warships, crewed by soldiers from 6 different hegemony species, began the journey to Sol. These were not patrol vessels or scout ships. These were conquest ships, designed to break planetary defenses and reduce civilizations to rubble. The fleet had never failed. The fleet had never even been seriously challenged. Commander Yithral, who led the fleet, expected this mission to be routine: arrive, demonstrate overwhelming force, crush any resistance, begin the occupation. It was a process they had repeated dozens of times. He gave his crew a brief speech before they made the jump to Sol. "The humans think they can resist us," he said. "They are wrong. They are always wrong. In a few days, Earth will belong to the hegemony, and we will add another species to our collection." His crew cheered. They looked forward to the conquest. Humans were said to be creative and adaptable, which meant they would make valuable slaves. The fleet jumped. On Earth, Admiral Vance stood in the command center of the UES Retribution. The ship was hidden in the shadow of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, completely invisible to any sensors the hegemony possessed. Around her, officers monitored displays showing the entire solar system. Every human ship, every hidden platform, every weapon was marked and ready. 700 vessels of the main fleet, thousands of automated defense platforms, weapons that Earth had kept secret for decades, waiting for exactly this moment. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "the hegemony fleet has entered the system. 400 ships, approaching on standard vectors." Vance nodded. "Do they see us?" "No, ma'am. They're not even scanning properly. They're coming in like they own the place. They think they do." Vance looked at the main display. 400 red dots moving toward the inner system, toward Earth, toward everything humanity had built. "They think this will be easy." She thought about her grandchildren, living in a small house in New Zealand. She thought about all the people on Earth who were looking at the sky right now, wondering if they would live to see next week. She thought about the thousands of men and women under her command, ready to fight and die for their species. "Ma'am?" Her executive officer was watching her. "Your orders?" Vance straightened her uniform. She had been preparing for this moment for 40 years. Every simulation, every training exercise, every sleepless night had led to this. "Send them one last message," she said. "Let them know they were warned." The message was transmitted. It said, "You were warned. You chose to cross. Now face the consequence." Commander Yithral read the message on his bridge. He deleted it without responding. These humans and their pathetic attempts at intimidation. In a few hours, he would probably. Alarms screamed across his ship. "Commander!" His sensor officer shouted. "Contacts! Multiple contacts appearing on all vectors." Yithral stared at his display in disbelief. Where moments ago there had been nothing but empty space, ships were appearing. Not dozens, hundreds. 700 human vessels, materializing out of the darkness like ghosts. "That's impossible," he whispered. "We scanned this entire system. There was nothing here. They were hidden, Commander. Stealth technology we've never seen before." Before Yithral could respond, the human ships opened fire. The first volley hit the hegemony fleet like a hammer from an angry god. Ships that had survived dozens of battles simply disappeared. Shields that had held against species with thousands of years of technological development collapsed in seconds. The darkness of space lit up with explosions. "Return fire," Yithral screamed. "All ships, return fire." But there was nothing to fire at. The human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, appearing and disappearing, striking from angles that made no sense. The hegemony weapons that did fire seemed to pass through empty space where ships had been moments before. In 11 minutes, 381 hegemony ships were destroyed. Yithral watched in horror as his fleet, the pride of the hegemony, was torn apart by a species that was supposed to be primitive and helpless. His flagship shook as weapons fire struck its shields. "Commander, our shields are failing." "Retreat!" Yithral shouted. "All ships retreat. Jump to safe." His ship shook again, harder this time. The lights flickered. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Then everything went dark. When Yithral regained consciousness, his ship was drifting dead in space. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow over the bridge. Most of his crew were unconscious or injured. And on his view screen, he saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Human ships, surrounding his crippled vessel. Not firing, just watching, waiting. A transmission came through on the emergency channel. A human face appeared on his screen. A female, old by their standards, with gray hair and cold eyes. "Commander Yithral," Admiral Vance said. "Welcome to Sol. As you can see, things did not go as you expected." Yithral tried to speak but could only manage a hoarse whisper. How is this possible?" Vance tilted her head slightly. "You made a mistake that many species make, Commander. You assumed that because we were young, we were weak. You assumed that because we were small, we were helpless. You assumed that our warnings were bluffs." She leaned closer to the camera. "We do not bluff, Commander. We do not threaten. We promise, and we keep our promises." Yithral felt something he had never experienced before in his centuries of service. Something no hegemony commander had felt in thousands of years. Fear. "What? What will you do with us?" Admiral Vance smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not a kind one either. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. "That, Commander, depends entirely on what message your hegemony needs to receive. We gave you one warning. You ignored it. Now you will help us deliver a different kind of message." The transmission ended. Yithral sat in the darkness of his ruined bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, and realized that everything the hegemony believed about the universe had just been proven wrong. The humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. And the hegemony had just made the worst mistake in its 60,000-year history. 47 years before the hegemony arrived, a young scientist named Dr. Sarah Chen sat in a small conference room beneath the mountains of Switzerland. The room had no windows. The walls were thick concrete. The only door required 3 separate security codes to open. She was 28 years old, brilliant, and terrified. Around her sat 11 other people, scientists, military officers, and 2 politicians whose names she did not recognize. They had all been brought here in secret. They had all signed documents promising never to reveal what they were about to hear. An elderly man in a general's uniform stood at the front of the room. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "What I am about to tell you will change your understanding of our world. It will change your understanding of our future. And it will change your understanding of why we brought you here." He pressed a button, and a display screen came to life behind him. For the past 15 years, a secret project has been analyzing a simple question. Why is the universe so quiet? We call it the Fermi paradox. The galaxy is billions of years old. It contains billions of stars. Statistically, intelligent life should be everywhere. So where is everyone? Dr. Chen had wondered about this herself. Every scientist had. "We have considered many explanations," General Webb continued. "Perhaps intelligent life is rare. Perhaps technology always destroys the species that creates it. Perhaps the distances are simply too great." He paused. "But we have settled on a different explanation, one that is supported by mathematical models and probability analysis. One that is, frankly, terrifying." He changed the display. A map of the galaxy appeared, with certain regions highlighted in red. "We believe the universe is quiet because someone is making it quiet. We believe there are predator civilizations out there, ancient and powerful, that prey on younger species. They find them, they conquer them, and they either destroy them or enslave them. The silence we hear is not the absence of life. It is the sound of life being suppressed." The room was completely still. "We cannot prove this theory," Webb said. "We may never be able to prove it. But we have decided that hoping we are wrong is not a strategy. We have decided to prepare for the worst. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. We are going to build a fleet. We are going to develop weapons. We are going to train soldiers. And we are going to do it in complete secret, hidden from the public and from most governments. Because if we are right, someday something is going to come for us. And when it does, we need to be ready. General Webb pressed another button. Technical specifications began scrolling across the screen. Ship designs, weapon concepts, training programs, budget requirements. We call it Project Consequence. Its goal is simple: to ensure that any species that attacks humanity will face consequences so severe that they will never attack us again. Dr. Chen raised her hand. Her voice shook slightly when she spoke. General, even if we build all of this, how can we possibly hope to compete with a civilization that might be thousands or millions of years more advanced? Webb smiled grimly. We don't hope to compete, Dr. Chen. We hope to survive. And the key to survival is making your enemy decide that destroying you is more trouble than it's worth. He changed the display again. This time it showed a formula. Complex and strange. This is why you're here, Dr. Chen. You published a paper last year about theoretical applications of quantum field manipulation. You thought it was purely theoretical. You were wrong. We have reason to believe it can be made into a weapon. A weapon unlike anything that has ever existed. Dr. Chen stared at the formula. Her own work, twisted into something she had never imagined. You want me to help you build weapons. I want you to help us survive. Webb's voice was gentle but firm. You can say no. You can walk out of this room and return to your normal life, but I believe you understand what's at stake. I believe you understand why this matters. Dr. Chen thought about her family. Her parents in Shanghai. Her sister in California. The billions of people on Earth who had no idea what might be coming for them. When do we start? She asked. General Webb smiled. We started 15 years ago. You're just catching up. For the next 47 years, Project Consequence grew in secret. Beneath the surface of the moon, engineers carved out massive shipyards. They worked in shifts around the clock, building vessels designed by scientists who had devoted their lives to imagining how to fight an enemy they had never seen. In the asteroid belt, mining operations extracted materials that officially did not exist. Rare elements that Earth's governments insisted were too difficult to obtain were shipped in massive quantities to hidden processing facilities. On Mars, soldiers trained in specially constructed environments. They practiced combat scenarios against simulated enemies with superior technology. They learned to fight in zero gravity, in extreme temperatures, in conditions that would kill an ordinary person. They were told nothing about who their enemy might be. They only knew that someday they would be needed. The money came from 1,000 different sources. Black budgets buried within larger programs. Corporations that existed only on paper. Donations from wealthy individuals who had been told the truth and wanted to help. Every government on Earth contributed, though most of their citizens never knew. Thousands of scientists worked on weapons that defied conventional physics. They built missiles that could phase through shields. They developed energy weapons that could tear matter apart at the molecular level. They created stealth technology so advanced that a ship could sit beside you and you would never know it was there. Dr. Chen, now Dr. Sarah Chen Webb after marrying the general's son, led the most important project of all. Her theoretical work on quantum field manipulation had become something real, something dangerous, a weapon that could, in theory, destroy anything. She called it the consequence engine. It manipulates the quantum field itself, she explained to the review board. It doesn't just damage matter. It convinces matter that it shouldn't exist. Anything caught in its field simply stops being. The board members exchanged worried looks. Is there any defense against it? Dr. Chen shook her head. Not that we can imagine. The effect is instantaneous and complete. If it works as designed, nothing in the universe could survive a direct hit. And if it doesn't work as designed, she was quiet for a moment, then it might unmake everything within a significant radius, including whoever fires it. The board approved the weapon anyway. They had no choice. If something was coming for humanity, they needed every advantage they could get, even dangerous ones. As the decades passed, Project Consequence evolved. The first generation of leaders retired or died. General Webb passed away in 2119, still believing that first contact was imminent. He was wrong by nearly 30 years, but his preparations would prove correct. Helena Vance joined the project in 2098. She was 19 years old, fresh from the Naval Academy, idealistic and determined. She believed in the mission because she had been raised by parents who believed in it. Her mother had been a project scientist. Her father had been a ship captain in the Hidden Fleet. Service to humanity was in her blood. She rose through the ranks quickly. She was smart, tough, and willing to make hard decisions. By 2130, she commanded her own ship. By 2140, she commanded a battle group. By 2145, she was Fleet Admiral, in charge of the entire secret navy that humanity had spent half a century building. 700 warships, 47,000 personnel. Weapons that could crack planets. All of it hidden, waiting, preparing for an enemy that might never come. Some people within the project began to doubt. Maybe the Fermi paradox had a different explanation. Maybe they had wasted trillions of dollars and millions of person-hours on a threat that didn't exist. Admiral Vance never doubted. She looked at the galaxy and saw what General Webb had seen all those years ago. She saw silence where there should have been noise. She saw emptiness where there should have been life. And she knew, with complete certainty, that something was out there. When the Hegemony signal arrived in January 2147, she felt no surprise, only grim satisfaction. Finally, she said when her aide brought her the news. Wake up the fleet. Tell everyone their training is over. The real thing is here. The battle in the Sol system lasted 11 minutes. To the Hegemony soldiers who survived, it felt like an eternity. Commander Yithral watched from his crippled flagship as human ships moved through the wreckage of his fleet. They were collecting escape pods and rescue beacons. They were pulling survivors from disabled vessels. They were being careful. This confused him more than anything else. The Hegemony did not take prisoners. When they conquered a species, they either enslaved the survivors or killed them. There was no in-between. These humans had just destroyed the most powerful fleet the Hegemony had sent anywhere in centuries. They should be celebrating their victory, not worrying about enemy survivors. Commander, one of his officers said weakly. The male had a deep gash across his face and one arm hung useless at his side. What do? We wait, Yithral said. We have no choice. Hours passed. The human ships completed their work. Then a shuttle approached Yithral's flagship and docked with the emergency airlock. Armed humans entered the ship. They were smaller than Yithral expected, barely half his height, but they moved with precision and confidence. Their weapons were steady. Their eyes were cold. A female human approached him. She wore a uniform covered in markings he didn't understand. Her hair was brown, cut short. Her face was young. Commander Yithral, I'm Captain Torres. You and your crew are now prisoners of the United Earth Fleet. Yithral tried to stand tall despite his injuries. The Hegemony does not surrender. We would rather die than. No one asked you to surrender, Torres interrupted. Your ship is disabled. Your fleet is destroyed. Your options are, come with us peacefully, or we leave you here to suffocate when your life support fails. Your choice. Yithral hesitated. Every instinct told him to fight, to die with honor. But something in the human's eyes stopped him. It wasn't cruelty or hatred. It was something worse, indifference. She didn't care whether he lived or died. She was offering him a choice and would accept either answer without emotion. His death meant nothing to her. We will come with you, he said quietly. Torres nodded. Smart choice. Follow my team. Don't touch anything. Don't try anything stupid. We've already killed enough of you today. The prisoners were taken to a facility on one of Saturn's moons. It was clean, well lit, and surprisingly comfortable. Each prisoner had their own room with a bed, a bathroom, and a small window showing the stars outside. They were given food appropriate to their species, medical care for their injuries, even entertainment devices loaded with human media, translated into their languages. It was not what they expected. They're trying to break us, one officer insisted. This is a psychological technique. They'll start the torture soon, but the torture never came. Days turned into weeks. The humans asked questions, but they were polite questions. What was life like in the Hegemony? How did their technology work? What did they know about other species in the galaxy? When prisoners refused to answer, the humans simply shrugged and moved on. No threats, no punishment, just acceptance. Commander Yithral requested a meeting with whoever was in charge. To his surprise, the request was granted. Admiral Helena Vance entered his room 3 days later. She was alone, without guards. She sat down across from him as if they were colleagues discussing business. "Commander, you wanted to speak with me." Yithral studied her. This was the female who had commanded the human fleet. This was the person who had destroyed 400 Hegemony ships in 11 minutes. She looked ordinary, old, tired. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Doing what?" "Treating us well. Feeding us. Caring for our injuries. You are our enemy. You should be interrogating us. Torturing us. Making us suffer for what we tried to do to your world." Vance was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Yithral would never forget. "We're not treating you well because we're weak, Commander. We're treating you well because we're strong. Weak species torture their prisoners because they're afraid, because they need information desperately, because they have no other way to control their enemies. We're not afraid of you. We don't need your information desperately. We have complete control of this situation." She leaned forward slightly. "We're treating you well because we can afford to. Because showing mercy when you have absolute power says something important. It says that we're not animals. It says that we're not like you." "We are not animals either," Yithral protested. "No. What would the Hegemony have done if your fleet had won? If Earth had been conquered?" Yithral was silent. He knew the answer. They both did. "That's the difference between us," Vance said. "You came here to enslave or destroy us. We defended ourselves. We won. And now we're going to let you go. Let us go." Yithral couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. In 3 days, we're going to put every survivor from your fleet into shuttles. We're going to give you enough supplies to reach Hegemony space, and we're going to set you free." "Why?" "This makes no sense." Admiral Vance stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars for a long moment. "Because we need messengers," she said finally. "We need someone to go back to your Hegemony and tell them what happened here. We need them to see the recordings, to hear the stories, to understand exactly what they're dealing with." She turned back to face him. "We gave your leaders one warning. They ignored it. Now we're going to give them a different kind of warning. One they won't be able to ignore." "What kind of warning?" Vance smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, the kind that shows up in orbit around their homeworld. Yithral felt his blood turn to ice. You're attacking Varath Prime?" "Not attacking. Visiting. Our fleet left Sol 3 hours ago. 4,700 vessels are on their way to your capital right now. They'll arrive before you do, even if you leave immediately." 4,700? That's impossible. You only had 700 ships in the battle. In that battle, yes. We have more. Many more. And we're bringing all of them. Yithral's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. The Hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 60,000 years. They had never faced a threat like this. They had never even imagined a threat like this. "What do you want?" he whispered. "We want peace. Real peace. We want your Hegemony to recognize human sovereignty and leave us alone forever. We want to build relationships with species who are willing to treat us as equals. And if the High Council refuses," Admiral Vance's smile faded. Her eyes became hard. "Then we will demonstrate what our weapons can do to planetary infrastructure. We will start with military installations, then government buildings, then population centers. We will keep demonstrating until they agree to our terms or until there's nothing left to demonstrate on." She walked to the door and paused. "Go home, Commander. Tell your leaders what you saw. Tell them what we did to your fleet in 11 minutes. And tell them to make the smart choice when our ships arrive. Because we've already proven that we can destroy them. The only question is whether we'll have to." She left. Yithral sat alone in his room, staring at the stars, trying to understand how everything the Hegemony believed had been proven wrong in a single day. The humans were not prey. They were not primitive. They were not weak. They were humanity. And the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Yithral stood at the observation window of his shuttle and watched the Sol system shrink behind him. His ship was one of 19 that had survived the battle. 19 out of 400. The rest were debris now, floating in the darkness, monuments to the Hegemony's arrogance. Around him, 30,000 survivors sat in silence. Some were injured and wrapped in bandages provided by human medics. Some stared at nothing, their minds still trying to process what had happened. Some wept quietly, mourning friends and comrades who would never come home. They had been given everything they needed: food, water, fuel, medical supplies. The humans had even repaired the most critical systems on their shuttles. It was the kind of treatment the Hegemony reserved for important allies, not defeated enemies. Yithral did not understand these humans. He had spent his entire life learning that the galaxy was simple. There were predators and there was prey. The strong took what they wanted. The weak served or died. This was the natural order. This was how things had always been. But the humans did not follow the natural order. They had won completely. They could have killed every survivor. They could have tortured them for information. They could have kept them as prisoners forever. Instead, they had shown mercy. Why? His second-in-command approached. Lieutenant Voss's Ral was young, barely a century old, with a long scar across her face from where a console had exploded during the battle. "Commander, the crew is asking questions. They want to know what happened. They want to know how we lost. We underestimated them," Yithral said simply. "We assumed they were like every other species we have conquered. We were wrong. But how? They are so young. Their civilization is barely developed. How could they defeat us so easily?" Yithral thought about Admiral Vance's words, about strength and mercy, about the difference between the hegemony and humanity. "They spent 50 years preparing for us," he said. "While we grew comfortable with our power, they were building weapons and ships and training soldiers. They knew we were coming before we even knew they existed, and when we arrived, they were ready. But our technology is superior. Our ships are faster, stronger, more advanced. Our technology is older. There is a difference." Yithral turned away from the window. "We have not faced a real threat in thousands of years. We have grown lazy. Our weapons are the same weapons our ancestors used. Our tactics are the same tactics that worked against species that could barely fight back." He looked at the data chip in his hand. The humans had given one to every shuttle. Full recordings of the battle. From every angle. They wanted the hegemony to see exactly what had happened. The humans are different. They came from a world that was trying to kill them from the day they evolved. They survived ice ages and predators and diseases and each other. They never stopped fighting, never stopped adapting, never stopped preparing for the next threat. Lieutenant Voss Ral was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What happens when we return home? What happens when the High Council sees these recordings?" Yithral did not answer immediately. He walked to the navigation console and checked their course. 2 weeks to hegemony space. 2 weeks to figure out how to explain to the most powerful leaders in the galaxy that they had just lost a war before it even properly started. "I don't know," he admitted. "But the humans said their fleet is already heading to Vareth Prime. They will arrive before we do. Whatever happens next, it will not be our decision." The journey home was long and quiet. The survivors had little to do except think about what had happened. Some reviewed the battle recordings over and over, trying to find some explanation, some mistake the humans had made that could be exploited next time. They found nothing. The human tactics had been perfect. Their weapons had been overwhelming. Their coordination had been flawless. Others talked among themselves in hushed voices. They shared stories about the battle, about comrades who had died, about the strange mercy the humans had shown them. One conversation spread through the shuttles like a virus. A young soldier named Krixtal had been captured during the battle. His escape pod had been picked up by a human ship, and he had spent 3 days as a prisoner before being transferred to the shuttles. During that time, he had talked extensively with his human guards. "They asked about my family," Krixtal said. "They wanted to know if I had children, if my parents were still alive, what my home was like. They seemed genuinely curious." "Why would they care?" another soldier asked. "I don't know. But one of them showed me pictures of her own family, her mate and her young offspring. She said she was fighting to protect them. She said she didn't hate us. She just wanted us to leave her people alone." This confused the hegemony soldiers. In their culture, warriors did not think about family during combat. They did not show weakness to enemies. They certainly did not share personal information with prisoners. "They are strange creatures," an officer muttered. "Soft and sentimental. It is amazing they were able to defeat us at all." "Perhaps that is why they defeated us," Commander Yithral said. Everyone turned to look at him. He had been standing in the doorway, listening. "I don't understand, Commander." Yithral walked into the room and sat down among the common soldiers. This was not normal behavior for a commander, but nothing was normal anymore. "We fight for the glory of the hegemony," he said. "We fight because we are told to fight. We fight because it is our duty. But what do we fight for, really? What would we die for?" No one answered. "The humans fight for their families. They fight for their homes. They fight for each other. They have something to lose, and they know exactly what it is. Perhaps that makes them fight harder. Perhaps that makes them refuse to surrender even when they should." He thought about Admiral Vance, standing alone in the prisoners' quarters, explaining why she had shown mercy. "Because we can afford to. Because showing mercy when you have absolute power says something important. We have grown too comfortable," Yithral continued. "We conquer species that cannot fight back. We destroy civilizations that pose no real threat. We have forgotten what it means to face an enemy that is truly dangerous." The humans reminded us. On the 10th day of the journey, they received a transmission from Hegemony space. Commander Yithral gathered the senior officers from all 19 shuttles for a conference call. What they heard confirmed their worst fears. The human fleet arrived at Vareth Prime 3 days ago. The Hegemony communications officer reported. His voice was strained. 4,700 vessels. They have established a sphere formation around our homeworld. They are not attacking, but they have made it clear that they will if we do not negotiate. "What is the High Council doing?" Yithral asked. "They are debating. Many voices call for counterattack. The combined Hegemony fleet outnumbers the humans. Some believe we can win. They believe wrong," Yithral said flatly. "I watched 400 of our best ships destroyed in 11 minutes. The humans barely suffered any casualties. Our technology cannot match theirs. Our tactics cannot counter theirs. If we attack, we will lose." "The High Council may not agree, Commander. Chancellor Morith Vex is under pressure from the military factions. They see this as an insult that must be answered with force." Yithral closed his eyes. The fools. The absolute fools. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. "I have recordings," he said. "Full sensor data from the battle. I have testimony from 30,000 survivors. I have evidence that will prove beyond any doubt that attacking the humans would be suicide. Can you transmit the recordings?" "I will transmit them now. Make sure the High Council sees them. Make sure everyone sees them. The Hegemony needs to understand what happened in that system." He began the upload. The files were massive, containing hours of footage from hundreds of ships. It would take time to transmit, but when it was done, no one could deny the truth. "Commander," the communications officer said hesitantly, "there is one more thing. The humans have made their demands. They want formal recognition of human sovereignty. They want a guarantee that no Hegemony ship will ever enter their space without permission. And they want something else." "What?" "They want us to release all slave species. Every civilization we have conquered in the last 1,000 years. They want them freed." The officers on the call began shouting. This was impossible. Outrageous. The Hegemony's entire economy depended on slave labor. Releasing them would cause chaos. But Yithral remained calm. "They want us to become something different," he said quietly. "They want us to stop being conquerors. We cannot agree to that. The Hegemony would collapse. The Hegemony may collapse anyway. Look at what happened to our fleet. Look at what their ships can do. If they wanted to, they could destroy our homeworld. They could annihilate our species. Instead, they are offering us a choice. Some choice. Surrender everything we have built or die." Yithral shook his head. "No. Become something better or face the consequences of what we are. That is the choice." The other officers stared at him in disbelief. "Commander, you almost sound like you agree with them." Yithral was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that would have been treason a month ago. "I spent 3 days in human custody. I was treated with kindness and respect. I was given food and medical care and comfortable quarters. And I asked myself, what would we have done to them if we had won? What did we plan to do to them?" No one answered. They all knew. "We planned to enslave their entire species. We planned to strip their world of resources. We planned to destroy their culture and break their spirit, and use them as tools until they were worn out and useless." He looked around the virtual conference room. "The humans showed us mercy when they had every reason to show us cruelty. Perhaps they deserve better from us than we planned to give them. Perhaps the galaxy deserves better from us." The shuttles arrived at the edge of Hegemony space 4 days later. What they found was not what they expected. The human fleet was still in position around Varath Prime, but the situation had changed. The combined Hegemony fleet, every warship from all 12 member species, had assembled in response. Over 3,000 vessels, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen, faced off against the smaller human force, and nothing was happening. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the flagship," Lieutenant Vossesrau reported. "The High Council wants a full report. They want you to come aboard immediately." Yithral nodded. "Dock us at the nearest station. I'll take a shuttle to the flagship." 2 hours later, he stood before the High Council of the Hegemony. The chamber was enormous, designed to intimidate. 12 thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by the leader of a member species. Screens behind them showed the tactical situation. Thousands of ships facing each other, neither side moving. Chancellor Morithvek sat at the center, ancient and powerful. He had ruled the Hegemony for 400 years. He had overseen the conquest of 37 species, and now he faced something he had never faced before, an enemy he could not defeat. "Commander Yithral," the Chancellor said, "you have returned. Tell us what happened." Yithral told them everything. The battle, the destruction of the fleet, the capture and imprisonment, the mercy the humans had shown, the message they had sent. When he finished, the chamber was silent. "You expect us to believe this?" one of the council members demanded. "You expect us to believe that a species barely capable of interstellar travel destroyed 400 of our ships in 11 minutes? The recordings are available for your review," Yithral said calmly. 30,000 survivors can testify to what they saw. The evidence is undeniable. Then we must counterattack with overwhelming force. The combined fleet has 3,000 ships. The humans have only, with respect, Counselor, the humans have 4,700 ships here. They have more at home, and their weapons are unlike anything we have ever seen. Yithral's voice was firm. "I watched our shields fail against their weapons. I watched our missiles pass through empty space where their ships had been moments before. We cannot win this fight." "Then what do you suggest?" Chancellor Morithvek asked. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. Yithral hesitated. What he was about to say would end his career. It might end his life. But he had spent 2 weeks thinking about it, and he had reached a conclusion he could not ignore. "I suggest we accept their terms. All of them." The chamber exploded in outrage. Council members shouted. Military leaders demanded his arrest. But Chancellor Morithvek raised a hand, and slowly, the room fell silent. "Explain your reasoning, Commander. The humans could destroy us. They could reduce our worlds to ash and scatter our people across the galaxy. Instead, they are offering us peace. They are offering us a chance to survive. Yes, their terms are harsh. Yes, they require us to change everything about ourselves. But we will still exist. We will still have our homes and our families and our futures." He looked around the chamber. "The alternative is extinction. I have seen what their weapons can do. If we fight them, we will lose. Not just this battle, but everything. Every ship, every world, every member of every species in the Hegemony. Is our pride worth that much? Is our power worth more than our survival?" The chamber was silent. Chancellor Morithvek stood. He was very old, 900 years, and he moved slowly. But his eyes were sharp. "Contact the humans," he said. "Tell them we agree to negotiate." The military leaders began to protest, but the Chancellor silenced them with a look. "I have ruled this Hegemony for 4 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have learned one lesson above all others. Survival is more important than pride. The humans have beaten us. Fighting them further will only ensure our destruction." He turned to Yithral. "You will lead our negotiating team, Commander. You have met their admiral. You understand them better than any of us. Find a way to end this without more bloodshed." Yithral bowed. "Yes, Chancellor." As he left the chamber, he allowed himself a small moment of hope. Maybe the Hegemony could change. Maybe the galaxy could change. Maybe the humans would teach them something new. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and looked at the alien world filling her view screen. Varath Prime, the capital of the Hegemony, a planet that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 60,000 years, and now it was surrounded by human ships. She had not slept in 3 days. The journey from Sol had taken 17 days, moving at speeds that the Hegemony's best scientists would have said were impossible. Her fleet had arrived to find the aliens in complete chaos, scrambling to assemble a response, sending frantic messages demanding to know how humans had traveled so fast. She had not answered their messages. She had simply waited. Now, 4 days later, the situation had finally stabilized. The combined Hegemony fleet floated nearby, 3,000 warships from 12 different species. They outnumbered her fleet, but not by much. And after what had happened in Seoul, numbers alone meant nothing. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony flagship. They want to negotiate." Vance felt something loosen in her chest. It was what she had hoped for, but not what she had expected. The Hegemony had ruled through fear and force for thousands of years. She had thought they would choose to fight, even knowing they would lose. Perhaps she had underestimated them. Put them through. The screen flickered, and she found herself looking at Chancellor Morath Vex. He was ancient, his gray skin wrinkled and spotted with age, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, calculating. This was a being who had survived 900 years of political intrigue. He was not to be underestimated. "Admiral Vance," he said. His voice was deep and formal. "I am Chancellor Morath Vex, of the Hegemony. I believe we have matters to discuss." "Chancellor, I'm glad you've decided to talk instead of fight. I have seen the recordings from your system. I have spoken to Commander Yithral. I understand what your weapons can do." He paused. "I am old, Admiral. I have seen many things, but I have never seen anything like what you did to our fleet. We warned you. Your ambassador ignored us. Your fleet ignored us. We had no choice but to demonstrate that we were serious. Yes, you demonstrated very effectively." The Chancellor's expression was unreadable. "You could have destroyed our homeworld by now. You have the power. Why haven't you?" Vance had expected this question. She had spent the entire journey preparing her answer. "Because destruction is easy. Building something is hard. We could kill you, but that wouldn't solve anything. Another species would rise to take your place. Another empire would form. The cycle would continue forever." She leaned forward slightly. "We want something different. We want to break the cycle. We want to build a galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquer. Where civilizations trade and share knowledge instead of fighting over territory. Where being different doesn't mean being enemies." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. "You speak of ideals. The Hegemony deals in reality. Then here is reality. You cannot defeat us. You can fight us, but you will lose. You can refuse our terms, but we will enforce them anyway. The only question is how much suffering happens between now and the inevitable outcome. And what is that outcome? A galaxy where humanity and the Hegemony exist as equals. Where your slave species are freed. Where conquest is replaced by cooperation. That is what we want. That is what we will accept. Nothing less." Chancellor Morath Vex studied her through the screen. Behind him, she could see other council members watching, their alien faces showing various expressions of fear and anger and uncertainty. "You ask us to give up everything we have built. We ask you to build something better. The Hegemony has lasted 60,000 years through force. Imagine how long it could last through cooperation. Imagine what you could accomplish with allies instead of slaves." "Idealism," the Chancellor said again. But there was something in his voice now. Something that might have been curiosity. "Commander Yithral told me something interesting," Vance continued. "He said that the humans he met were not what he expected. He said we showed mercy when we could have shown cruelty. He said we treated our prisoners with kindness. This confused him greatly. I'm sure it did. The Hegemony doesn't understand kindness. You see it as weakness. But kindness is not weakness, Chancellor. Kindness is what separates civilization from barbarism. Kindness is what makes life worth living." She stood up from her command chair and walked closer to the screen. "We are offering you kindness. We could destroy you. We could take revenge for what your ambassador said, for what your fleet tried to do. Instead, we are offering you peace, real peace. A chance to be something more than conquerors." The Chancellor was quiet for a long time. Behind him, the council members whispered among themselves. "I need time," he finally said. "These decisions cannot be made quickly. The council must debate. Our people must be consulted." "How much time?" 24 of your hours." Vance nodded. 24 hours. "But Chancellor, understand this. We have waited 50 years for this moment. We have prepared for this meeting since before your ambassador knew Earth existed. We will not wait forever. I understand. The transmission ended. For the next 24 hours, both fleets waited. On the Hegemony side, chaos reigned. Council members argued. Military leaders demanded action. Citizens across a dozen worlds watched the news feeds and wondered what was happening. The mighty Hegemony, rulers of the galaxy, was being dictated to by a species that had been unknown 6 months ago. Some called for war. They pointed to the numbers. 3,000 Hegemony ships against 4,700 human ships. The odds were not impossible. And even if they lost, better to die fighting than to surrender everything their ancestors had built. Others called for peace. They had seen the recordings from Sol. They had watched 400 ships destroyed in 11 minutes. They understood that numbers meant nothing against weapons that could not be stopped. Commander Yithral spoke to anyone who would listen. I was there, he said, again and again. I saw what happened. We cannot win this fight. We can only choose how we want to lose. On the human side, things were quieter. Admiral Vance allowed her crew to rest in shifts. She walked through her ship, talking to soldiers and officers, thanking them for their service, reminding them why they were here. She stopped at the observation deck and found a young ensign staring at Vareth Prime through the transparent hull. First time seeing an alien world? She asked. The ensign jumped to attention. Admiral, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. At ease. This isn't an inspection. Vance walked to stand beside him. I asked you a question. Yes, ma'am. First time. I grew up on Earth, in a small town in Canada. I never thought I'd leave the planet, let alone be part of this. He gestured at the fleet, at the alien world, at everything around them. What's your name, Ensign? Thomas Chen, ma'am. Chen Webb, actually. My grandmother was one of the original Project Consequence scientists. Vance smiled. Dr. Sarah Chen Webb. I knew her. She was brilliant. She invented some of the weapons we're carrying on this very ship. She never talked about it. The project, I mean. She died when I was 12, and I always wondered why she spent so much time away from the family. Now I understand. She gave her life to protect humanity. So did thousands of others. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, pilots, people who worked in secret for decades, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Vance looked at Vareth Prime. And now, here we are. Do you think they'll accept our terms, Admiral? I don't know. I hope so. I didn't come here to start a war. I came here to end one before it could begin. And if they don't accept? Vance was silent for a moment. Then she said, then we'll do what we have to do. And I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if there was something else I could have said. Some other way I could have handled this. She put a hand on the young ensign's shoulder. That's the burden of command, Ensign. You make the best decisions you can with the information you have. And then you live with the consequences. The 24 hours passed slowly. When the time was nearly up, Admiral Vance returned to the bridge. Her officers were at their stations, monitoring the Hegemony fleet for any sign of hostile movement. So far, everything was quiet. Any response from the Council? She asked. Not yet, Admiral. They have 2 minutes remaining. Vance sat down in her command chair. She had done everything she could. She had made her case. She had offered peace. Now the decision was in someone else's hands. The minutes ticked by. 1, 2, Admiral. Incoming transmission from the Hegemony flagship. Put it through. Chancellor Morathvex appeared on the screen. He looked tired, older than he had the day before. Behind him, the council members were assembled, their faces grim. Admiral Vance. The Hegemony High Council has reached a decision. Vance held her breath. After much debate, we have agreed to accept your terms. All of them. The bridge erupted in cheers. Officers hugged each other. Someone started crying. Vance felt tears in her own eyes, though she fought to keep her face calm. Chancellor, you've made a wise decision. I do not know if it is wise. I know only that it is necessary. Morathvex's voice was heavy. We will recognize human sovereignty. We will release the slave species. We will dismantle the conquest fleets. Everything your people demanded, we will provide. And in return, we ask only that you give us time. Change cannot happen overnight. Our civilization has been built on conquest for 60,000 years. Transforming it will take time, patience, and help from those who understand what we are trying to become. Vance nodded slowly. We can provide that. Advisors, teachers, trade partners, whatever you need. There is one more thing. The Chancellor hesitated. Commander Yithral spoke highly of you. He said you were honorable. He said you showed mercy when you had every reason to show cruelty. I tried. I am old, Admiral. I will not live much longer. But I want to understand something before I die. You could have destroyed us. You could have taken revenge. Why didn't you? Vance thought about the question for a long moment. It was the same question Yithral had asked. The same question she had been asked 100 times during the journey to Varath Prime. Because revenge is easy, she finally said. It's the simplest thing in the world to hurt someone who hurt you. But it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't build anything. It just creates more pain and more hatred. She looked at the ancient alien on her screen. We came from a violent world, Chancellor. We spent most of our history killing each other over land and resources and ideas. We were very good at destruction. But somewhere along the way, we learned that destruction wasn't enough. We learned that we had to build something too. And what are you trying to build? A future. A galaxy where our children can grow up without fearing what's hiding in the darkness. A civilization where species work together instead of against each other. A universe where the silence between stars is filled with conversation instead of fear. Morathvex was quiet for a long moment. That is a beautiful dream, Admiral. It's more than a dream. It's a choice. And today, you made the right one. The signing of the Accord of Sol took place 1 week later. It happened on a neutral station constructed specifically for the purpose, built in the empty space between the two fleets. Representatives from all 12 Hegemony species attended, along with delegates from Earth and the surviving humans on Mars and the outer colonies. Admiral Vance signed on behalf of humanity. Chancellor Morathvex signed on behalf of the Hegemony. Commander Yithral watched from the sidelines, feeling something he had never felt before. Hope. The Accord was comprehensive. It recognized human sovereignty over the Sol system and any territories humanity claimed in the future. It guaranteed that no Hegemony vessel would enter human space without explicit permission. It established trade agreements and cultural exchanges. It created a framework for the gradual release of all slave species over a period of 50 years. And it included something that Vance had insisted on: a mutual defense pact. If any external threat emerged, humanity and the Hegemony would face it together. You think there are more threats out there? Morathvex asked when this provision was discussed. I think the galaxy is very large and very old, Vance replied. And I think that anything that survived out there for millions of years did so by being dangerous. We should be prepared. After the signing, there was a reception. For the first time in history, humans and Hegemony members mingled freely, sharing drinks and stories and awkward attempts at humor. Commander Yithral found himself standing next to Admiral Vance, both of them watching the celebration. I still don't understand you, he admitted. You had absolute power over us. You could have demanded anything. Why were you so reasonable? Vance smiled. Because power isn't the goal, it's just a tool. We wanted peace, Commander. Real, lasting peace. And you don't get that by humiliating your enemies. You get it by turning enemies into partners. Is that what we are now? Partners? We're trying to be. It won't be easy. We have thousands of years of hostility to overcome. But I believe it's possible. She looked out at the celebration. My grandmother used to say that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its friends. It's how it treats its enemies. We had a chance to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. I think we passed the test. Yithral was silent for a moment. I think you did too, he said quietly. Outside the station, human and Hegemony ships floated side by side, their running lights blinking in synchronized rhythm. It was a small thing, but it meant something. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in 60,000 years, it was changing for the better. 50 years had passed since the Accord of Sol. The galaxy was a different place now. The old Hegemony still existed, but it had changed so much that the elders barely recognized it. The conquest fleets were gone, converted into trade vessels and exploration ships. The slave species had been freed. Their worlds returned to them, their cultures beginning to rebuild. It had not been easy. There had been rebellions and protests and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. Some species refused to forgive what had been done to them. Some Hegemony members refused to accept the new order. For years, Chaos had threatened to consume everything, but slowly, painfully, the galaxy had found a new balance, and, at the center of it all, was humanity. Human ships traveled to every corner of known space now. Human engineers helped rebuild worlds that had been stripped by centuries of exploitation. Human doctors shared medical technology that saved millions of lives. Human teachers established schools where children of 100 different species learned side by side. It was not the empire that the old hegemony would have built. It was something stranger, messier, more difficult to control. It was a partnership. Ambassador Yithral stood at the window of his office on Luna and watched Earth rise over the horizon. He was old now, very old, well past the normal lifespan of his species, but he had refused to retire. There was still too much work to do. After the accord was signed, he had requested a transfer to Earth. He wanted to understand these humans who had changed everything. He wanted to learn how they thought, how they lived, what made them different from every other species the hegemony had encountered. 50 years later, he was still learning. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." A young human woman entered. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Fleet, with admiral stars on her collar. Her name was Elena Vance, and she was the granddaughter of the woman who had once held Yithral's life in her hands. "Ambassador, are you ready? The ceremony starts in an hour." Yithral turned from the window. "I am ready, though I confess, I am not sure why they want me there. I was the enemy 50 years ago." Elena smiled. "That's exactly why they want you there. You represent how far we've come. An enemy who became an ally. A warrior who became a diplomat. Your presence means something." She walked to stand beside him at the window, looking out at the blue and green planet that had changed the galaxy. "My grandmother talked about you sometimes. In her final years, she said you asked good questions. She said you were the first hegemony member who really tried to understand us. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. I never met anyone quite like her. She was. And she believed in what we're building here. Right up until the end." Elena paused. She also said something else. She said the hardest part wasn't winning the war. It was making sure we didn't become like the enemies we defeated. Yithral nodded slowly. "I have seen what happens when victors become conquerors. They start as liberators and end as tyrants. Your species has avoided that trap so far. We've tried. It hasn't been easy. There are people who think we should have destroyed the hegemony when we had the chance. People who think we showed too much mercy. And what do you think?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "I think mercy was the right choice. I think we proved something to the galaxy that day. We proved that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. We proved that power can be used for something other than domination." She looked at him with eyes that reminded him very much of her grandmother. "We proved that humanity was worth saving." The ceremony took place at the memorial site on Luna. It was a simple place. A black obelisk standing in a crater, surrounded by smaller monuments. The obelisk bore the names of everyone who had served in Project Consequence, from the first scientists who had designed the weapons to the soldiers who had crewed the ships in that final battle. Thousands of people had gathered for the 50th anniversary. Humans, of course, but also members of dozens of other species, former enemies, former slaves, all of them united by the events of half a century ago. Fleet Admiral Elena Vance stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Behind her, Earth hung in the black sky like a promise. 50 years ago, she began. This species faced extinction. An empire that had conquered 300 worlds came to our doorstep with a simple demand. Surrender or die. She paused, letting the words sink in. Our ancestors had a different answer. They spent 50 years preparing for that moment. They built ships and weapons and trained soldiers. They sacrificed their careers and their families and sometimes their lives, all for a threat that might never come. They did this because they believed that humanity deserved to survive. They believed that we had something to offer the galaxy. She looked at the names on the obelisk. These people are heroes. Not because they were brave, though they were. Not because they were strong, though they were that too. They are heroes because they understood something important, that the future is not something that happens to you, it's something you build. She turned to face the crowd directly. 50 years ago, we built a fleet that could destroy worlds. Today, we have used that power to rebuild them. 50 years ago, we faced an enemy that wanted to enslave us. Today, we work side by side with their descendants. 50 years ago, We were alone in the galaxy. Today, we have allies and partners and friends on 100 different worlds. This is what our ancestors fought for. Not victory, not revenge, not dominance. They fought for the chance to build something better. And I believe we have honored their sacrifice. The applause started slowly and built to a roar. Elena stepped back from the podium and found Ambassador Yithral waiting for her. "That was a good speech," he said. "Thank you. I meant every word." They walked together away from the crowd, toward a quieter section of the memorial. Here, smaller monuments honored specific people and events. One of them bore the image of Helena Vance, the first fleet admiral, who had died 15 years ago at the age of 92. "I think about her often," Yithral said, looking at the monument. "I have lived for centuries and met countless leaders, but I have never met anyone quite like your grandmother. What made her different?" Yithral thought about the question for a long time. She understood power. She understood it better than anyone I have ever known. She knew that power is not just about what you can do. It is about what you choose not to do. He turned to face Elena. "When she had my fleet at her mercy, she could have destroyed us. She could have executed every survivor. She could have started a war of revenge that would have burned across the galaxy. Instead, she showed mercy. She sent us home with a message instead of a death sentence. Why do you think she did that? Because she knew that killing us would not make humanity safe. It would only prove that humans were just as brutal as everyone else. She wanted to prove something different. She wanted to prove that humanity was better." Elena smiled sadly. "She wasn't sure we were. She told me once that she was terrified the whole time. Terrified that she was making a mistake. Terrified that the hegemony would see mercy as weakness and attack again. But she did it anyway. Yes, she did it anyway." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the monument. "I have studied your species for 50 years, Yithral said finally. "I have learned your history, your languages, your cultures. I have tried to understand what makes you different from every other species the hegemony encountered. Have you figured it out?" Yithral made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No. Every time I think I understand, you surprise me again. But I have a theory. Tell me. You carry violence in your blood. Your world was dangerous, and you survived by being dangerous too. You are capable of terrible destruction. We saw that in the Battle of Seoul." He paused. "But you also carry something else. Hope, perhaps, or stubbornness, or maybe just a refusal to accept that things have to stay the way they are. You look at the galaxy, and you don't see it as it is. You see it as it could be. Is that good or bad? I think it is. Rare. Most species accept the galaxy as they find it. They adapt to the rules that already exist. Humans look at the rules and say we can do better. And then somehow, against all odds, you do." Elena looked up at Earth, hanging in the sky above them. "We've made a lot of mistakes over the years. We've done terrible things to each other and to our world. Sometimes I wonder if we deserve all this. If we earned it, or if we just got lucky. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe not." They started walking back toward the ceremony. The crowd was beginning to disperse. Groups of different species mixing and talking, sharing food and stories. "What happens next?" Yithral asked. "Where does humanity go from here?" Elena smiled. "Outward. Always outward. There are still billions of stars we haven't visited. Civilizations we haven't met. Questions we haven't answered. And threats you haven't faced. Yes, those two." Her smile faded slightly. "We still don't know what's out there. Beyond the space we've explored, we still don't know why the galaxy was so quiet for so long. We're better prepared than we were 50 years ago. But the universe is very large." Exactly. They reached the edge of the memorial site. Shuttles were arriving to take guests back to their ships, their homes, their worlds. "I should go," Yithral said. "I have meetings tomorrow. Trade negotiations, cultural exchange programs, the boring work of maintaining peace. The most important work," Elena corrected. "Wars end quickly. Peace takes forever. Your grandmother said something similar once. She was a wise woman." Yithral started toward the shuttle, then stopped and turned back. "Fleet Admiral, there is something I have wanted to say for 50 years. I never found the right moment." "What is it?" The old alien was quiet for a moment. His dark eyes reflected the light from Earth and the stars beyond. "Thank you." Elena blinked. "For what?" "For everything. For defeating us and sparing us. For showing us that there was another way to live. for refusing to become what we were. He paused. The hegemony was dying. Fleet Admiral, we had been dying for thousands of years. Even if we didn't know it, you could have ended us quickly. Instead, you gave us a chance to become something new. We gave you a choice. You made the decision. Yes, but you made the decision possible. He straightened, somehow looking less old, less tired. My species spent 60,000 years conquering the galaxy. We thought we were the masters of everything. We were wrong. You taught us that, and for that lesson, I will always be grateful. He turned and walked toward the waiting shuttle. Elena watched him go, feeling the weight of 50 years of history in her chest. When he was gone, she turned back to look at the memorial. The black obelisk stood silent against the stars, names carved in its surface, a testament to everyone who had prepared for a day that might never come. They had been ready. When the test came, humanity had passed, not just by winning, but by choosing what kind of winner they wanted to be. Above her, ships from a dozen different species moved through the sky, their running lights blinking in peaceful patterns, human ships and hegemony ships and ships from species that had been slaves a generation ago, all of them sharing the same stars. This was what victory looked like. Not conquest, not domination, not revenge. Partnership, cooperation, hope. Elena Vance, granddaughter of the woman who had faced down an empire, looked up at the galaxy and smiled. There were still dangers out there. There always would be. The universe was vast and dark and full of things that humanity had never seen. But whatever came next, they would face it together. Earth had sent one final warning, and the galaxy had listened. Now it was time to build something worth protecting. Far away, in a region of space that humanity had not yet explored, something stirred. It was old. Older than the hegemony, older than any civilization that currently existed. It had slept for millions of years, waiting for something to wake it. And now, faintly, it sensed something new in the galaxy. A ripple in the pattern, a species that had risen faster than expected, that had defeated an ancient enemy, that was spreading across the stars with unusual speed. The something considered this information, then it went back to sleep, but not as deeply as before, and in its dreams, it began to plan. Ambassador Kethral stood on the bridge of the Divine Conquest and looked at the blue planet on the screen. He had seen many worlds in his long life. He had watched species kneel before the might of the Valanthi Dominion. He had accepted the surrender of kings and presidents and hive queens. But something about this small world made him pause. "Report," he said, his voice calm and cold. The science officer turned from her station. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among their kind. "The planet is called Earth, Ambassador. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They are young, very young. Their first spaceflight was only 200 of their years ago." Kethral made a sound of amusement. 200 years. The Valanthi had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. These humans were like children taking their first steps. "Technology level?" he asked. "Primitive. They have basic, faster-than-light travel. Simple energy weapons. Their largest warships are smaller than our escort vessels." The science officer paused. "Ambassador, they should not be a problem. Our fleet could destroy their entire military in less than a day." Kethral nodded slowly. Behind his ship, 300 warships of the Valanthi Dominion waited in formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to burn a continent. Together, they had conquered 17 star systems. They had never lost a battle. "Open a channel," Kethral commanded. "Let us introduce ourselves to these humans." The communication officer worked at his station. A moment later, he looked up with surprise on his face. "Ambassador, they are already hailing us. They detected our arrival and have been waiting for us to speak." This was unusual. Most primitive species panicked when they saw a Valanthi fleet. They ran or hid or sent desperate messages begging for mercy. But these humans had simply waited. "Put them through," Kethral said. The main screen changed. A human female appeared. She had dark skin and white hair, and she sat in a simple chair in a simple room. She did not look afraid. She did not look impressed. She looked at Kethral the way one might look at an unexpected guest who had arrived at dinner time. "I am Ambassador Kethral of the Valanthi Dominion," he announced. "Rulers of 17 star systems. Masters of the Outer Rim. We have come to offer your species a place in our great empire." The human woman nodded slowly. I am Secretary General Chen Wei of the United Earth Government. Welcome to our solar system. We noticed your fleet 3 days ago when you entered our sensor range. Kethral felt a small flicker of surprise. 3 days? Their sensors had detected the fleet from that distance? He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. Technology could not overcome numbers. You understand why we are here, Kethral said. It was not a question. I believe so, Chen Wei replied. You have come to conquer us, to add Earth to your empire, to take our resources and use our people as servants or soldiers. Kethral appreciated her directness. You understand the situation clearly. This is good. It will make things easier. If you surrender now, we will be merciful. Your people will serve the Dominion. But they will live. If you resist. He let the threat hang in the air. Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking carefully about her next words. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. Ambassador Kethral, I must ask you a question. In your 40,000 years of conquest, has any species ever said no to you? The question was so unexpected that Kethral almost laughed. Many have tried to resist. All have failed. The Dominion is supreme. This is the natural order of the galaxy. I see, Chen Wei said. Then let me be clear, Ambassador. Earth says no. Silence fell on the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at the screen. Kethral felt his 4 hearts beating faster. This tiny species, with their primitive ships and their young civilization, was refusing the Dominion? You do not understand what you are saying, Kethral said slowly. Look at your sensors. Count our ships. We have 300 warships in your system. Your entire fleet numbers less than 50 vessels. This is not a negotiation. This is an offer of mercy. Chen Wei smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. Ambassador, I have a message for you from the people of Earth. It is very simple. Go home. Leave our system. Do not return. If you do this, no harm will come to you or your fleet. Kethral stared at her. He had lived for over 500 years. He had negotiated with hundreds of species. He had never heard anything like this. Is this a joke? He demanded. Are you trying to buy time? Do you think reinforcements will save you? We have no reinforcements coming, Chen Wei said. We need none. I am giving you a warning, Ambassador. A final warning. Take your ships and go home. Tell your masters that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them to find easier prey. Kethral felt anger rising in his chest. This human was insulting him, insulting the Dominion, insulting 40,000 years of glorious history. Very well, he said coldly. You have chosen death for your species. When we are finished, there will be nothing left of your civilization but ashes and memories. End transmission. The screen went dark. Kethral turned to his officers. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. Battle formation, he commanded. All ships prepare for combat. We will teach these humans the price of defiance. The fleet began to move. 300 warships spread across space in perfect formation, their weapons charged with deadly energy, their crews prepared for the slaughter to come. On the planet below, cities continued their normal business. People went to work, children went to school, families ate dinner together. They knew the aliens were coming. They knew war was about to begin. But there was no panic, no fear. The people of Earth went about their lives as if nothing unusual was happening. This confused the Valanthe officers greatly. They had conquered many worlds. They had seen species react to invasion in many ways. But they had never seen a species simply ignore them. Ambassador, the tactical officer reported, the humans are launching ships. 47 vessels, all smaller than our cruisers. Kethral watched the human fleet form up between Earth and the Dominion Armada. It was like watching insects prepare to fight a fire. Brave, perhaps, but utterly hopeless. Destroy them, Kethral ordered. The divine conquest fired first. A beam of concentrated plasma crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds. It struck the lead human ship directly, and did nothing. Kethral leaned forward in his command chair. Report. Why is that ship still there? The weapons officer was frantically checking his instruments. I do not understand. Ambassador. The beam hit the target. Full power. It should have vaporized the ship completely. But our sensors show. No damage. None at all. Fire again, Kethral commanded. All forward batteries. The divine conquest unleashed its full firepower. Dozens of plasma beams, missile salvos, and kinetic rounds poured toward the human fleet. Other Dominion ships joined the attack, the space between the two forces filled with enough destructive energy to crack a moon. When the light faded, the human ships remained, untouched, unharmed. They had not even moved. Fear began to creep into Kethral's hearts. This was impossible. This was against everything he knew about physics and warfare. No shield could stop that much firepower. No armor could survive such an assault. "Ambassador," the sensor officer shouted. "The human ships are moving. They are coming toward us." The human fleet advanced. They moved slowly, almost casually, closing the distance between themselves and the Dominion armada. As they flew, a transmission came through on all frequencies. It was Secretary General Chen Wei again. Her face was calm, but there was something in her eyes now. Something cold and hard. "Ambassador Kethral," she said. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn why Earth said no." The human ships opened fire. Kethral had never seen weapons like this. There was no visible beam, no missile trail, no warning at all. One moment, a Dominion warship was there. The next moment, it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if it had never been. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethral screamed. "All ships, scatter." The fleet tried to run, but the human ships were faster than anything the Volanthi had ever encountered. They moved through the Dominion formation like predators through a herd, and everywhere they went, ships disappeared. On the bridge of the Divine Conquest, alarms screamed. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. Ships were vanishing from the fleet register faster than anyone could count. "How many have we lost?" Kethral demanded. The tactical officer looked up with terror in his eyes. 112 ships, Ambassador. Destroyed in less than 2 minutes. And we have not damaged a single human vessel. Kethral felt the universe shift around him. In 40,000 years, the Dominion had never faced an enemy they could not defeat. They had weapons that could shatter planets. They had shields that could withstand the heart of a star. They were the masters of the galaxy. And these humans, these primitive children, who had only been in space for 200 years, were destroying them without effort. "Retreat," Kethral whispered. Then louder. "All ships, retreat. Jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here." The remaining Dominion ships tried to run. Their hyperspace drives powered up. Their navigation systems calculated escape routes. But something was wrong. The drives activated, but the ships did not move. They remained trapped in normal space, unable to flee. "Ambassador, our hyperspace drives are not working," the engineering officer reported, his voice shaking. "Something is blocking them. Some kind of field surrounds the entire fleet." The human ships continued their attack. 200 ships gone now, then 250. The mighty Volanthi fleet was being erased from existence. Kethral watched the destruction with growing horror. He thought about his homeworld. He thought about his family. He thought about the 40,000 years of Dominion history that would end here, in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, against an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Then, suddenly, the attack stopped. The human ships pulled back. They formed a line between the remains of the Dominion fleet and Earth. They did not fire again. A communication request came through. Kethral accepted it with trembling hands. Secretary General Chen Wei appeared on the screen once more. She looked exactly as she had before. Calm, patient, unafraid. "Ambassador Kethral," she said, "you have 47 ships remaining. We have disabled your hyperspace drives, but we will release them shortly. You will be able to return home." Kethral could barely speak. "Why? Why did you stop? Why not destroy us all?" "Because we are not like you," Chen Wei replied. "We do not kill when we do not have to. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We only wanted to be left alone. You would not allow that. So we showed you what happens when Earth is threatened." "What are you?" Kethral whispered. Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. "We are human," she said finally. "We are young, as you said. We have only been in space for 200 years. But we have been fighting wars among ourselves for 10,000 years. We have had time to think about weapons, about defense, about survival. While your species was conquering the stars, We were learning how to survive against ourselves. Perhaps that is why we are different. Kethral did not understand. He could not understand. His entire worldview was shattered, and he did not know how to rebuild it. Go home, Ambassador, Chen Wei continued. Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them that any ship that enters our system with hostile intent will not leave. And tell them this: we wish no war with the Dominion. We wish no war with anyone. But we will defend ourselves. Always. Without mercy. Without hesitation. The transmission ended. Kethral sat in his command chair for a long time. Around him, his surviving officers worked in shocked silence. They collected escape pods from destroyed ships. They counted the dead. They tried to understand what had happened. Finally, the hyperspace drives came back online. The blocking field had been released, just as Chen Wei had promised. Take us home, Kethral ordered. His voice sounded old and tired. The 47 surviving ships of the Valanthi fleet limped into hyperspace. They left behind the wreckage of 253 warships. They left behind the bodies of over 2 million soldiers. They left behind their pride, their certainty, their belief in Dominion supremacy. The journey home took 3 weeks. During that time, Kethral barely left his quarters. He spent hours staring out the window at the streaming lights of hyperspace. He thought about the human woman, Chen Wei. He thought about her calmness, her patience, her complete lack of fear. She had known. From the very beginning, she had known how the battle would end. She had tried to warn him. She had given him a chance to leave peacefully, and he had refused, because he could not imagine that a primitive species could defeat the mighty Dominion. When the fleet finally reached the homeworld, Kethral was summoned before the High Council. He stood in the great chamber where so many conquered species had knelt in surrender. He told his story. He showed the recordings from the battle. He described the weapons that could make ships simply disappear. The council listened in growing silence. When Kethral finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, the first among equals, the ruler of the entire Dominion, rose from his throne. He was ancient, over 2,000 years old, and he had seen the empire grow from a single planet to 17 star systems. He had never known fear in his long life, but fear was in his eyes now. What do you recommend, Ambassador? The first among equals asked. Kethral took a deep breath. I recommend that we never contact Earth again. I recommend that we declare their entire region of space forbidden. I recommend that we forget they exist and hope they forget about us. Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. The Dominion did not run from anyone. The Dominion did not hide from anyone. The Dominion was supreme, but the first among equals nodded slowly. I agree, he said. Send word to all our territories. The Sol system is forbidden. Any ship that approaches that region will be considered lost. The humans are not to be disturbed. 1 month later, a message reached Earth from the Valanthi Dominion. It was brief and formal. It acknowledged the misunderstanding during first contact. It expressed hope for peaceful relations in the future. It formally recognized Earth's sovereignty over its solar system and all surrounding space for a distance of 500 light-years. Secretary General Chen Wei read the message in her office. She smiled slightly and put it aside. There was other news that morning. News from across the galaxy. News about a great empire that had been humiliated by a primitive species. News about humans and their mysterious weapons. News about a small blue planet that had said no to the masters of 17 star systems. The Galactic Senate convened for the first time in 400 cycles. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss a single topic: the humans of Earth. What do we know about them? Asked the Senate Speaker. Very little, admitted the chief intelligence analyst. They are young. They are small. They have only 47 warships. And they destroyed over 250 Valanthi vessels in less than 30 minutes. Fear spread through the Senate chamber. The Valanthi were not the strongest power in the galaxy, but they were among the strongest. If humans could destroy them so easily, what chance did anyone else have? What do they want? Someone asked. Unknown. They have made no demands. They have not attempted to expand beyond their system. They simply asked to be left alone. The Senate debated for days. Some wanted to send their own fleets to test human defenses. Some wanted to offer alliance and friendship. Some wanted to declare the entire region around Earth as forbidden space and pretend the humans did not exist. In the end, they decided to wait and watch. They sent probes to the edge of human space. They listened to human communications. They studied everything they could learn about this strange young species. And slowly, a terrible realization began to spread through the galaxy. Something dangerous lived in the Orion Arm. Something that even the mightiest empires could not defeat. Something that had looked at the masters of the galaxy and simply said no. The humans were not interested in conquest. They did not seem interested in power or territory or domination. They only wanted to be left alone. But no one believed that would last forever. Sooner or later, the humans would turn their eyes outward. Sooner or later, they would want more. And when that day came, the galaxy would change forever. 3 years had passed since the Volanthi disaster. The galaxy had watched and waited. Spy probes circled at the edge of human space. Intelligence agencies collected every scrap of information they could find. Scientists studied the recordings from the battle again and again, trying to understand the weapons that had destroyed an entire fleet. But the humans did nothing. They did not expand. They did not threaten their neighbors. They built colonies on the moons of their own planets. They improved their ships. They went about their lives as if nothing unusual had happened. This confused the galaxy greatly. Every other species that had gained such power had immediately used it. They had conquered their neighbors. They had built empires. They had reached for the stars with hungry hands, but not the humans. They seemed content to stay in their little corner of space. They seemed to have no ambition beyond their own solar system. Some species found this comforting. Perhaps the humans truly wanted only peace. Perhaps they would never become a threat. Others found it terrifying. A species powerful enough to destroy the Volanthi fleet without trying, content to stay home and build. That was not natural. That was not how the universe worked. They must be planning something. The Galactic Trade Consortium watched the humans with great interest. The consortium was not a military power. They had no warships, no armies, no weapons of conquest. Instead, they had something far more powerful: money. The consortium controlled trade routes across the galaxy. They set prices for everything from rare metals to slave labor. They loaned money to governments and collected interest that would last for generations. They had brought more species under their control through debt than any empire had conquered through war. Director Voss Halen sat in his office on the consortium headquarters station and studied the reports about Earth. He was a mercanti, a species known for their business skills. His people had helped found the consortium thousands of years ago. They had built it into the largest economic power the galaxy had ever seen. Interesting, Voss muttered as he read the latest intelligence. Very interesting. His assistant, a young mercanti named Telia, looked up from her desk. Director? The humans have no interstellar trade, Voss explained. They have no connections to galactic markets. They have no access to standard technologies. They are completely isolated. Is that not what they want? Telia asked. Perhaps. But isolation is expensive. They must develop everything themselves. They must mine their own resources. They must build their own factories. Voss smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. And that means they are vulnerable. Telia frowned. Director, the Volanthi tried to conquer them. We saw what happened. The Volanthi used weapons, Voss said dismissively. We use contracts. Very different things. The humans may have weapons that can destroy fleets, but can those weapons stop economic pressure? Can they fight inflation? Can they shoot interest rates? He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, ships from 100 worlds moved through the station's docking rings. Trillions of credits flowed through this station every day. The consortium did not need to conquer anyone. They simply made themselves necessary. Prepare a trade delegation, Voss ordered. The finest ships, the best negotiators. We will offer the humans everything they could want: technology, star charts, membership in the galactic community. And in exchange, we will ask only for fair trade agreements and modest protection fees. Protection fees? Telia asked carefully. Protection from what? Voss smiled again. From the dangers of the galaxy. Of course. Piracy, political instability, economic uncertainty. The universe is a dangerous place, especially for a young species. We are simply offering to help them navigate these dangers, for a reasonable price. 3 months later, A consortium trade fleet arrived at the edge of human space. 20 ships, each one a flying marketplace. They carried samples of goods from across the galaxy. They carried contracts written by the finest lawyers the consortium employed. They carried dreams of profit that made Voss Halen's 4 hearts beat faster. The humans greeted them politely. They allowed the fleet to enter their system. They welcomed the consortium representatives to Earth. Director Voss Halen himself led the delegation. He stepped off his shuttle onto a landing pad in a city called Geneva and looked around with interest. The city was pleasant enough. Trees lined the streets. People walked to work or rode in vehicles that floated above the ground. It was all very primitive by galactic standards, but not unpleasant. A human woman waited to greet him. She was tall and thin, with gray hair and eyes the color of steel. She wore a simple blue suit and carried no visible weapons. "Director Halen," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Earth. I am Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo." Voss took her hand carefully. He had studied human customs. A handshake was a greeting, a sign of good faith. He found the gesture oddly intimate. "Thank you, Minister," he replied. "The consortium is honored to begin negotiations with your species." Over the next several weeks, the negotiations proceeded. Voss was impressed by the humans. They were smart and careful. They asked good questions. They understood the value of what the consortium was offering. They also asked questions that made Voss uncomfortable. "Tell me about the Valanthi Dominion," Minister Okonkwo said one afternoon. They were sitting in a conference room overlooking a lake. Sunlight sparkled on the water. "Before they attacked us, what was their relationship with the consortium?" "The Valanthi are valued customers," Voss replied carefully. "They purchase goods from consortium markets. They borrow money for their military operations. And when they conquer a new species, what happens? The consortium helps integrate the new territory into the galactic economy. We establish trade routes. We provide loans for reconstruction. We help the conquered species become productive members of society." "Productive members," Okonkwo repeated. "What does that mean exactly?" Voss shifted in his seat. "It means they contribute to the galactic economy. They provide labor. They pay their debts. And if they cannot pay their debts, then arrangements are made. Assets are transferred. Labor contracts are extended." Voss was sweating now. This was not how these negotiations usually went. Most species were so grateful for consortium attention that they signed whatever contracts were put in front of them. "Director Halen," Okonkwo said quietly, "would you say that the consortium profits from war and conquest?" "I would say that the consortium provides necessary services during times of transition, and those services include loans at high interest to conquered peoples who have no choice but to accept. The interest rates are determined by risk assessment. Newly conquered populations are a higher risk." Okonkwo nodded slowly. She did not seem angry. She seemed thoughtful. This worried Voss more than anger would have. "Let me tell you a story, Director," she said. "Long ago, before humans went to space, there were organizations on Earth that worked much like your consortium. They loaned money to desperate people. They charged high interest. They took everything when the debts could not be paid. Do you know what we called them?" Voss shook his head. "Loan sharks. Predators. Criminals." Okonkwo's voice was still calm, still polite. "We made laws against them. We protected people from their practices. We understood that some forms of business are simply wrong. Minister, I assure you that the consortium operates within all galactic laws. Laws that the consortium helped write," Okonkwo observed. "Laws that protect consortium interests. Laws that allow the consortium to profit from the misery of others." She stood up and walked to the window. For a long moment, she looked out at the lake in silence. "Director Halen, I have a proposal for you. Not the proposal you came here hoping for. Something different." Voss felt his hearts beating faster. "I am listening. Earth will trade with the consortium. We will buy your technologies. We will study your star charts. We will learn everything you can teach us about the galaxy." "Excellent," Voss began, reaching for his contracts. "I am not finished," Okonkwo said. "We will buy these things, but we will not sell anything in return. We will not take your loans. We will not pay your protection fees. We will not become a part of your economic empire. That is not how trade works," Voss protested. "It is how our trade will work," Okonkwo replied. "We will pay fair prices for what we want, but we will not owe you anything. We will not be obligated to you in any way. Take it or leave it." Voss stared at her. In all his years as a trade negotiator, no species had ever made such a proposal. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was not how the galaxy worked, but he remembered the Volanthi fleet. He remembered the recordings of ships simply vanishing into nothing. He remembered the fear in the eyes of the first among equals. "I will. Present your proposal to the Consortium Council," he said finally. The council debated for weeks. Many wanted to reject the human offer entirely. Who were these primitives to dictate terms to the consortium? But others pointed out that human money was still money. Human technology sales would still bring profit. And perhaps, in time, the humans would realize they needed more from the consortium. Perhaps they would become more reasonable. In the end, the council accepted the human terms. Trade began between Earth and the consortium. What happened next shocked everyone. The humans learned fast, terrifyingly fast. They bought consortium technology and took it apart, piece by piece. They studied how it worked. They improved it. Within 6 months, they were building their own versions that were better than the originals. They bought star charts and navigation data. Within a year, human ships were traveling routes that had taken the consortium centuries to map. They bought manufacturing equipment. Within 18 months, human factories were producing goods that matched consortium quality at half the price. Director Voss Halen watched the reports with growing horror. This was not how it was supposed to work. New species were supposed to become dependent on consortium products. They were supposed to need consortium expertise. They were supposed to fall deeper and deeper into consortium debt until they had no choice but to do what they were told. The humans had broken the system. They had taken what they needed and used it to become stronger. They had not become dependent on anyone. "This is impossible," Voss complained to Telia one evening. "No species develops this fast. It takes thousands of years to reach their level of technology. They have done it in less than 2. "Perhaps they were always capable," Telia suggested. "Perhaps they simply lacked the knowledge, not the ability." Voss slammed his hand on his desk. "They are cheating somehow. They must be. No one can learn this fast." But the humans were not cheating. They were simply human. They had brains that evolved to learn new things quickly. They had cultures that valued innovation and creativity. They had a history of solving impossible problems through sheer stubbornness and determination. And now they had galactic technology to study. 3 years after the first trade deal, Earth announced that they were closing their markets to consortium goods. They no longer needed to buy technology. They could make everything themselves. The same day, the human government announced that all consortium assets in the solar system were being nationalized. The consortium trading stations, the warehouses, the data centers that had been built in Earth orbit. All of it now belonged to humanity. "They cannot do this," Voss screamed when he heard the news. "This is illegal. This violates the trade agreements." He pulled up the contracts and began reading through them, searching for the clause that would allow the consortium to demand compensation. He found nothing. The human lawyers had been very careful. Every word had been chosen with precision. Every clause had been written to protect human interests. The consortium had been beaten at their own game. "Director," Telia said quietly, "there is more." "More? What more could there possibly be?" "The humans are building a fleet. Not warships, trading vessels. They are planning to establish their own trade routes through the galaxy. They are planning to compete with us." Voss felt the blood drain from his face. Competition. The consortium had not faced real competition in 3,000 years. They had always been able to buy out or destroy any rivals. But the humans could not be bought, and they certainly could not be destroyed. "We must stop them," Voss said. "We must find a way." But there was no way. The consortium sent lawyers to argue their case before the Galactic Senate. The humans sent their own lawyers, who argued better. The consortium tried to impose trade sanctions. The humans simply traded with species who wanted access to their technologies. The consortium tried to spread rumors about human products being dangerous or unreliable. The humans released independent testing data that proved their products were superior. Every move the consortium made, the humans countered. Every scheme failed. Every plan collapsed. And the humans kept building. They established trade relationships with species the consortium had exploited for centuries. They offered fair prices and fair terms. They did not charge protection fees. They did not demand interest on loans. They simply traded, honestly and openly. Species that had been drowning in consortium debt found new options. They could sell their goods to humans and pay off their obligations. They could buy human products without going deeper into debt. They could escape the trap that had held them for generations. The consortium empire began to crumble. Not through war or violence, but through simple economics. The humans offered something better, and the galaxy chose them. Director Voss Halen was called before the Consortium Council to explain his failures. He stood in the great chamber where he had once celebrated countless victories and looked at the angry faces of his colleagues. "How did this happen?" the council chairman demanded. "We sent you to turn the humans into customers. Instead, they have become competitors. They have stolen our technologies, our markets, our clients. Explain yourself." Voss had no explanation. He had done everything correctly. He had followed all the standard procedures. The humans should have become dependent on the consortium, like every other species before them. "The humans are different," he said finally. "They do not respond to our methods. They learn too fast. They adapt too quickly. They cannot be controlled through debt or dependency because they refuse to be dependent on anyone." "Then find another way," the chairman ordered. "Use force if you must." Voss shook his head. "We have no force to use. The consortium has no military. We have always relied on others to provide that. And after what happened to the Volanthi, no one will attack Earth on our behalf. No one." The council fell silent. For the first time in 3,000 years, they faced a problem they could not solve with money. They faced an enemy they could not buy or bankrupt. They faced a species that played by different rules. "Then what do we do?" the chairman asked quietly. "We adapt," Voss replied. "We learn from them. We become better. Or we die." The consortium did not die, but it changed. Over the following decades, it reformed its practices. It stopped the predatory loans. It lowered its interest rates. It began offering fair trade terms to all species. It had no choice. The humans were competing with them, and the humans were winning. The only way to survive was to become more like them. On Earth, Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo watched the changes with quiet satisfaction. She had not planned any of this when she first sat down with Director Voss Halen. She had simply wanted to protect her people from exploitation, but the results had been better than she could have imagined. The consortium had been humbled. Species across the galaxy had been freed from debt. A new era of fair trade was beginning, and Earth had barely tried. A message arrived from the Galactic Senate. It was a formal complaint filed by the consortium, accusing Earth of unfair trade practices. The irony was not lost on Okonkwo. She filed the message without responding. There were more important things to worry about. Human ships were now traveling throughout the galaxy. Human goods were being sold on 100 worlds. Human ideas about fairness and freedom were spreading like fire through dry grass. The galaxy was changing. The old powers were weakening. The oppressed were finding their voices. And at the center of it all, one small blue planet continued to grow stronger, not through conquest, not through war, simply by offering something better. Some species called it the human trade revolution. Others called it the beginning of the end for the old order. But on Earth, they called it something simpler: good business, and they were just getting started. In the halls of the Galactic Senate, representatives whispered to each other about the humans. They had watched the Volanthi fleet destroyed. They had watched the consortium humiliated. They were beginning to wonder what the humans would do next. Whatever it was, they were certain of one thing: the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had looked at the masters of the stars and refused to kneel. They had looked at the engines of economic exploitation and broken them. They had looked at the way things had always been done and simply said no, and no one could stop them. The Krethak's hive mind had existed for longer than most species could imagine. It had no beginning that anyone remembered. It had no history that anyone had recorded. It simply was, and it had always been. 1 billion years of hunger stretching back into the darkness of time. The hive mind was not like other species. It did not negotiate. It did not trade. It did not form alliances or sign treaties. It only had one purpose: to feed. It moved through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Entire civilizations had been devoured. Countless worlds had been stripped to bare rock. The hive mind took everything and left nothing behind. No one knew how many Krethaks there were. Billions. Trillions. Perhaps more. Each one was small, no larger than a human hand. They looked like insects with too many legs and mouths full of needle teeth. Individually, they were nearly mindless, but together, connected through the hive mind's vast consciousness, they became something terrible. The hive mind had noticed the humans. It had watched the Volanthi fleet burn. It had observed the consortium's humiliation. It had seen this small species from a small planet defy the powers of the galaxy. And it had felt something new, something it had not felt in a very long time. Interest. The hive mind did not fear the humans. It had existed for 1 billion years. It had consumed species with weapons far more advanced than anything the humans had shown. It had survived threats that made the Volanthi fleet look like toys. Whatever the humans could do, the hive mind was confident it could survive. But there was something else. Something about the humans that drew the hive mind's attention. They were small, like the Krethax. They had evolved on a single world, like the Krethax. They had spread across their star system and were beginning to reach for others, like the Krethax had done long ago. In a strange way, the hive mind saw something familiar in humanity, something that reminded it of its own ancient past. Perhaps that was why it decided to devour them. Perhaps it wanted to consume that familiar spark. Perhaps it was simply hungry. The hive mind began to move toward Earth. Human deep space sensors detected the swarm 3 months before it arrived. At first, the operators thought their equipment was malfunctioning. The readings made no sense. They showed millions of contacts moving through space in perfect formation, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. When the full scope of the swarm became clear, even the most experienced officers felt fear. How many? Admiral Chen Wei asked. She had been Secretary General during the Volanthi attack, but she had since returned to military service. She preferred the simplicity of warfare to the complexity of politics. We cannot get an exact count, her sensor officer replied. The swarm is too dense, but our estimate is between 5 and 7 billion individual organisms. Chen Wei was silent for a long moment. The Volanthi had brought 300 ships. The humans had destroyed them easily. But this was something different. This was not a fleet. This was a living tide, vast beyond imagination. What do we know about them? She asked. They are called the Krethax. They are controlled by a single consciousness called the hive mind. They have been active in the galaxy for at least 1 billion years. In all that time, no species has ever successfully defended against them. They simply overwhelm everything through numbers. Weapons? Each individual organism can spit a highly corrosive acid. In sufficient quantities, it can eat through any known material. The swarm as a whole can also generate electromagnetic pulses that disable technology. Chen Wei nodded slowly. This was bad. Very bad. The weapons that had destroyed the Volanthi fleet were designed for ship-to-ship combat. They could erase a warship from existence, but they could not fire fast enough to stop billions of individual organisms. Get me a connection to Earth Command, she ordered. We need to have a conversation about Project Prometheus. Project Prometheus had been born in the years following the Volanthi attack. Human scientists had studied the weapons that had saved Earth, trying to understand how they worked. What they found had terrified them. The weapons were not human, not entirely. They had been discovered, buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a structure that was at least 300 million years old. Someone had visited Earth long before humans evolved. Someone had left behind technology that defied everything humanity understood about physics. Human scientists had spent decades studying the alien devices. They had learned to activate some of them. They had learned to aim them, but they did not understand how they worked. The principles behind the weapons were simply beyond human science. Project Prometheus was the effort to change that. The best minds on Earth had been brought together to unlock the secrets of the ancient technology. They had made progress. Slow and painful progress. They had learned things about the universe that challenged everything they believed. And they had built new weapons. Weapons based on principles they barely understood. Weapons that could do things that should have been impossible. Now, with the Krethax swarm approaching, those weapons would be tested for the first time. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the Earth's Resolve, and watched the swarm approach. On the display screens, it looked like a dark cloud spreading across the stars. Billions of organisms moving with a single purpose, coming to consume everything she loved. All stations report ready, her executive officer announced. Project Prometheus is online and awaiting your command. What exactly are we activating? Chen Wei asked. She had been briefed on Project Prometheus, but the scientists had struggled to explain their work in terms she could understand. The scientists call it a reality anchor, the XO replied. It creates a field that stabilizes the laws of physics. Within the field, certain things become possible that should not be possible anywhere else. Such as moving stars. Chen Wei turned to stare at her XO. Moving stars? You mean actual stars, like our sun? Yes, Admiral. The technology allows us to manipulate gravitational fields on an enormous scale. We can move objects that should be immovable. We can change the shape of space itself. Chen Wei thought about this for a long moment. The implications were staggering. With such power, humanity could reshape the galaxy. They could create new solar systems. They could destroy old ones. They would be limited only by their imagination. Does the hive mind know about this? She asked. We do not believe so. The technology has never been used outside the solar system. The Krethax have no way of knowing what we can do. Then let's keep it that way for as long as possible. Chen Wei turned back to the display screens. The swarm was closer now. She could see individual organisms on the enhanced images. They were horrible things, all teeth and claws and hunger. Open a channel, she ordered. Let's see if we can talk to them. The communication officer worked at his station. After a moment, he looked up with confusion on his face. Admiral, I'm getting a response. But it's strange. It's not coming from any single point. It seems to be coming from the entire swarm at once. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static. Then a voice emerged. It was not a normal voice. It sounded like millions of voices speaking in perfect unison, creating a single word at a time. We are the hive mind. Chen Wei felt a chill run down her spine. She had faced enemies before. She had fought in wars and seen terrible things. But she had never felt anything like the presence she sensed now. The hive mind was vast beyond comprehension. It was old beyond understanding, and it was utterly alien in a way that made even the Volanthi seem familiar. I am Admiral Chen Wei of the United Earth Defense Force, she replied. You are approaching our territory without permission. I am ordering you to stop. Silence. Then the terrible chorus of voices spoke again. We do not stop. We consume. It is our purpose. If you attack Earth, you will be destroyed, Chen Wei warned. The hive mind made a sound that might have been laughter. It came from millions of throats at once. A horrible chittering that filled the bridge speakers. Many have said this. All have been wrong. We have existed for 1 billion years. We have consumed species with weapons beyond your imagination. You are young. You are small. You will be food. Last warning, Chen Wei said quietly. Turn back now, or face the consequences. We will consume your worlds. We will devour your children. We will feast on your memories. And when you are gone, we will forget to you ever existed. Chen Wei closed her eyes for a moment. She had tried. She had given them a chance. It was more than the hive mind deserved, but it was what humanity believed in. Always offer peace first. Always give the enemy a chance to walk away. But some enemies would never walk away. Some enemies could only be stopped one way. End transmission, she ordered. Then to her weapons officer, activate Project Prometheus. Target the center of the swarm. Deep in the heart of Earth's resolve, ancient machines hummed to life. Power flowed through circuits that human engineers barely understood. Reality itself began to bend around the ship, stretching and twisting in ways that defied normal physics. On the display screens, something appeared in the center of the Krethax swarm. At first, it looked like a point of light. Then it began to grow. It became a sphere, then a larger sphere, then something so bright that the sensors could not properly display it. What is that? Chen Wei asked. We've created a localized pocket of altered space, her science officer explained. Within that pocket, we've changed the physical constants. Things that should happen very slowly are now happening very quickly. We've essentially created a small star from the ambient matter in the swarm. The new star expanded. Billions of Krethax organisms were caught in its blazing embrace. They burned instantly, reduced to ash and then to nothing. The swarm tried to scatter, but the star was growing too fast. It consumed everything within millions of kilometers. Then it did something impossible. It began to move. The star accelerated toward the densest part of the swarm, sweeping through the Krethax formations like a broom sweeping aside dust. Wherever it went, organisms died. The swarm that had seemed infinite was being thinned, carved apart by a weapon that should not exist. The hive mind's voice came through the speakers again. This time, there was something different in its tone. Something that might have been confusion or fear. This is not possible. You cannot create stars. No species can do this. We're not creating it, Chenwei replied calmly. We're moving it. Watch carefully. On the display screens, the star changed direction again. It curved through space in a way that defied gravity, following a path that no natural object could follow. It was being controlled, guided, aimed like a weapon. The hive mind fell silent. For the first time in a billion years, it faced something it could not understand. The laws of physics that governed the universe, the rules that had allowed the hive mind to survive and grow for countless ages, were being broken right in front of it. How? The hive mind demanded. How are you doing this? Chenwei smiled grimly. We found something, buried on our planet, something very old, something left behind by a species that existed before you were born. And we learned how to use it. She leaned forward in her command chair. This is your final warning. Leave our system, leave our region of space. Never return. If you do, we will destroy every last one of you. We have the power, we have the will, and we have absolutely no patience left for species that think they can consume everything they see. The swarm hesitated. Billions of organisms paused in their advance, waiting for guidance from the hive mind. They had never hesitated before. They had never needed to. The hive mind had always known what to do, but now the hive mind was uncertain. It had seen the impossible. It had watched stars move. It had felt millions of its children burn, and it understood, with terrible clarity, that the humans could do much worse. We will return, the hive mind said finally. We will find a way to defeat you. If you return, you will die, Chenwei replied. All of you. Every single organism. We will hunt you through the galaxy. We will burn your spawning grounds. We will erase you from existence. Do you understand? There will be no second chance. There will be no negotiation. There will only be extinction. The hive mind was silent for a long moment. The swarm continued to hover at the edge of the solar system, damaged but not destroyed. Billions of organisms still survived. The hive mind still commanded vast power, but it had felt fear. For the first time in a billion years, it had encountered something it could not simply consume. Something stronger than itself. Something that had looked at its endless hunger and simply said no. We understand. The swarm began to withdraw. Slowly at first, then faster. Billions of organisms turned and fled, retreating from the solar system, retreating from the region of space around Earth. They did not stop until they had put 3 entire galactic sectors between themselves and humanity. On the bridge of Earth's resolve, Admiral Chenwei watched them go. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had not shown it during the confrontation, but she had been terrified. The hive mind was vast and ancient and powerful. If Project Prometheus had not worked, if the weapons had failed, humanity would have been devoured. But the weapons had worked. The humans had won. Stand down from battle stations, she ordered. Begin recovery operations for any damaged ships, and get me a line to Earth. The government needs to know what happened here. The news spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Krethax hive mind, the terror of 1,000 civilizations, had been turned back by the humans. Not just turned back, humiliated. They had fled from a species that had only been in space for 2 centuries. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy scrambled to understand what had happened. They studied the sensor data, transmitted by spy probes. They analyzed every scrap of information they could find. What they discovered terrified them. The humans had moved a star. They had created matter from nothing. They had bent the laws of physics to their will. This was not advanced technology. This was something else entirely. This was power on a scale that no known species possessed. The Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species crowded into the great chamber, shouting over each other, demanding answers. What are they? Someone cried. How can they do these things? They are not natural. Another voice insisted. No species evolves this kind of power. They must have found something. Someone must have given them this technology. Does it matter? A third representative asked quietly. Whatever the source of their power, they have it. And they have shown they are willing to use it. What do we do now? No one had an answer. The galaxy had never faced anything like this. The old powers had always been able to contain any threat through force or economics or politics. But the humans could not be contained. They had weapons that defied understanding. They had defeated every enemy sent against them. They were growing stronger every day. And the most terrifying part? They still showed no interest in conquest. They had not demanded territory from the Volanthi. They had not tried to destroy the consortium. They had not pursued the hive mind as it fled. They simply defended themselves and went back to their lives. What did that mean? What were they planning? What would they do when they finally decided they wanted more? The questions kept the galaxy awake at night. The answers, if they existed, remained hidden behind human smiles and human patience. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Families gathered for meals and holidays. The crisis was over, and most humans simply moved on with their lives. But in secret facilities around the world, scientists continued their work on Project Prometheus. They were learning more every day about the ancient technology. They were building new devices, new weapons, new tools that would make humanity stronger. And they were asking questions. Who had built the original devices? Why had they been left on Earth? What had happened to the species that created them? Were they still out there somewhere, watching? The answers remained elusive. But the humans kept searching. They kept learning. They kept growing. Somewhere in the depths of space, the hive mind brooded. It had fled from Earth, but it had not forgotten. It was old and patient, and very, very hungry. Perhaps, given enough time, it would find a way to overcome the humans. Perhaps it would discover the secret of their power. Perhaps it would return, but not today, not tomorrow, not for a very long time. The humans had earned their place among the stars. They had faced the greatest terror the galaxy had ever known and stood their ground. They had shown the universe that humanity was not to be trifled with. And this was only the beginning. 20 years had passed since the hive mind fled from Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old powers still held their thrones, but their grip was weakening. Something new was rising, and it bore a human face. It began quietly. A human colony here, a trade agreement there. Nothing that seemed threatening. Nothing that demanded attention from the great empires and federations that ruled the stars. The first colony was established on a world called New Haven, 300 light-years from Earth. It was a small world, barely habitable, circling a dim red star. No one else wanted it. The humans settled it anyway, building domed cities and underground farms. Within 5 years, New Haven was thriving. Then came New Hope, then Frontier, then Horizon. Human colonies spread through the galaxy like seeds scattered by the wind. They appeared in forgotten corners of space, on worlds that other species had dismissed as worthless. The humans did not care. They built homes wherever they could find room. The Galactic Senate watched with growing unease. Human expansion was not aggressive. The humans did not take territory from other species. They did not demand tribute or submission. They simply settled empty worlds and minded their own business. But the pattern was troubling. The humans were everywhere now. Their ships traveled the trade routes. Their merchants sold goods on 100 worlds. Their language was becoming the common tongue of commerce. Without firing a shot, without threatening anyone, humanity was becoming one of the most widespread species in the galaxy. Senator Vethka of the Olani Collective studied the expansion maps with worried eyes. The Olani had been a major power for 10,000 years. They controlled 40 star systems and commanded fleets of thousands of warships. But looking at the maps, Vethka felt something she had never felt before. Uncertainty. They are surrounding us, she said to her advisors. Not with weapons, with colonies, with trade routes, with influence. They pose no military threat, one advisor replied. Their fleet is still small compared to ours. Is it? Vethka asked sharply. We saw what they did to the Volanthi. We saw what they did to the hive mind. Do you really believe their fleet is as small as it appears? The advisor had no answer. They are building something, Vethka continued. Not an empire. Something else. Something we do not understand. And by the time we figure out what it is, it may be too late to stop them. She was right to be worried. The humans were building something, but it was not what any of the old powers expected. It started with the Talani. They were a small species, only 3 colonies, living under the oppressive rule of the Volanthi Dominion. For centuries, they had served as laborers and soldiers for their masters. They had no rights. They had no hope. They existed only to serve. Then a human merchant ship arrived at their world. The captain, a woman named Maria Santos, spent a week trading goods and learning about the Talani. What she learned made her angry. This is wrong, she told her crew. These people are slaves in everything but name. The Volanthi take everything they produce and give nothing back. What can we do about it? Her first officer asked. We cannot fight the Dominion. No, Maria agreed. But we can help the Talani fight for themselves. She began smuggling. Not weapons, ideas, books about human history, stories about revolutions and freedom movements, guides to organizing resistance, information about legal systems and rights and democracy. She gave the Talani something they had never had before: knowledge. Other human merchants did the same on other worlds. They visited the oppressed and the forgotten. They shared stories and information. They planted seeds of change wherever they went. The old powers did not notice at first. What harm could a few books do? What threat could ideas pose to empires that had lasted for thousands of years? But ideas are dangerous things. They spread from mind to mind, growing stronger with each generation. They cannot be killed with weapons or stopped with walls. They are the most powerful force in the universe. On Talani Prime, a young leader named Kethri read the human books and dreamed of a different future. He organized meetings in secret. He spread the ideas to others. Within 10 years, he had built a movement that spanned all 3 Talani colonies. Then came the day of rebellion. The Talani rose up against their Volanthi masters. They seized control of their own governments. They declared independence, and when the Volanthi sent ships to crush them, they found the humans waiting. Not human warships, human witnesses, human reporters, human diplomats who broadcast everything to the entire galaxy. The Volanthi Dominion is about to commit genocide, the human ambassador announced on every communication channel. They are sending their fleet to murder billions of innocent people whose only crime is wanting freedom. The galaxy is watching. History is watching. What you do next will define you forever. The Volanthi hesitated. They were used to crushing rebellions in secret, far from the eyes of the galaxy. But now, everyone was watching. Every species, every government, every citizen with access to a communication screen was seeing what they did. In the end, the Volanthi withdrew their fleet. They could not risk becoming known as murderers before the entire galaxy. The Talani won their independence without a single shot being fired, and the humans had shown what they could do without using any of their terrible weapons. They had used something far more powerful: the truth. The same pattern repeated across the galaxy. Oppressed species learned about freedom. They organized, they resisted, and when their masters came to crush them, the humans were there, watching and recording and broadcasting. The old powers began to panic. Their empires were built on exploitation. They needed slave labor and tribute, and fear to survive. But fear was fading. The oppressed were learning that they did not have to submit. They were learning that there was another way. The Galactic Senate held emergency meetings almost every month now. The great powers accused each other of weakness. They blamed each other for failing to stop the humans. They proposed military action, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation. Nothing worked. The humans were too popular. Too many species saw them as heroes. Any attack on humanity would unite the galaxy against the attacker. We cannot fight them directly. Senator Vethka admitted during one heated debate. They are too strong, and too many species support them. We must find another way. What way? Demanded a Valanthi representative. They are destroying everything we have built. Every day, more species join their side. Every day, we grow weaker, while they grow stronger. We destroy them from within. Vethka replied. We send assassins. We sabotage their ships. We spread lies about them. We turn their allies against them. The plan was approved unanimously. The old powers would work together for the first time in history to destroy their common enemy. They would use every tool at their disposal. Spies, saboteurs, propaganda, murder, whatever it took to stop the humans. The first assassination attempt came 3 months later. A bomb was planted on a human colony ship carrying families to a new settlement. 3,000 people died, including 600 children. The galaxy waited for the human response. Surely, now the humans would unleash their terrible weapons. Surely, now they would burn the worlds of those responsible. Instead, the humans announced an investigation. They tracked the bomb to a Valanthi intelligence agent. They presented their evidence to the Galactic Senate. They demanded justice through legal channels. The Valanthi denied everything. The Senate refused to act. The humans' allies were outraged, but the old powers had enough votes to block any resolution. 3 weeks later, the Valanthi agent who had planted the bomb disappeared. His body was never found. Neither were the bodies of his 3 supervisors, his commanding officer, or the 7 politicians who had approved the operation. No one knew how the humans had done it. There were no witnesses, no evidence, no traces. The Valanthi officials simply vanished one night and were never seen again. A message arrived at the Valanthi capital the next morning. It was unsigned, but everyone knew who had sent it. Justice has been served. Do not test us again. We do not forget. We do not forgive. But for those who choose peace, we will be the best friends you ever had. The assassination attempt stopped. The sabotage stopped. The old powers pulled back, terrified of what the humans might do next. But the humans did not attack. They did not invade. They simply continued what they had been doing all along, building, helping, spreading ideas of freedom and justice wherever they went. The coalition of free worlds formed quietly, without announcement or ceremony. It began as a loose alliance of species that had been freed from oppression. They traded with each other. They defended each other. They shared technology and resources and ideas. The humans did not lead the coalition. They did not want to. Instead, they served as advisors and protectors. They offered their help to anyone who wanted it and asked for nothing in return. Within 5 years, the coalition had grown to include over 200 species. Many of them had been slaves or subjects of the old powers. Now they were free, independent, and growing stronger every day. The Galactic Senate watched the coalition with fear. Here was the threat they had always worried about. The humans were not building an empire for themselves. They were building an alliance that could challenge the entire established order. We must act now, Senator Vethka urged, before it is too late. We must unite our forces and destroy the coalition while we still can. With what forces? Another senator asked bitterly. Half our client species have joined the coalition. Our armies are half the size they were 20 years ago. And even if we gathered everything we had, could we defeat the humans? Could we even slow them down? No one answered. They all knew the truth. The humans had changed the game. Military power meant nothing when your subjects refused to fight. Economic strength meant nothing when everyone traded with your enemies. The old powers still held their thrones, but their kingdoms were crumbling beneath them. On Earth, the human government met to discuss the future. The old leaders had given way to new ones, but the policy remained the same: help others, ask nothing in return, and never compromise on justice. President David Okonkwo, the grandson of Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo, studied the reports from across the galaxy. The coalition was growing. The old powers were weakening. Everything was going according to plan. But there was a problem. The Senate is preparing something, his intelligence director reported. We do not know what exactly, but all the major powers are involved. They are pooling resources, sharing intelligence, coordinating in ways we have never seen before. A military strike? Okonkwo asked. Possibly. But it may be something else. Something more subtle. They know they cannot defeat us in open warfare. They may be planning something different. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The humans had always known this day would come. The old powers would not give up without a fight. They would try everything to stop the changes sweeping the galaxy. Increase security on all coalition worlds, he ordered. Double our intelligence gathering, and prepare our ambassadors. I think we are about to receive some visitors. He was right. 3 weeks later, a delegation from the Galactic Senate arrived at Earth. They came not with weapons but with offers. They wanted to negotiate. The humans agreed to meet them. The negotiation took place in Geneva, in the same building where Trade Minister Okonkwo had once confronted Director Vos Halen. The galactic delegation included representatives from every major power: Valanthi, Olani, Mercanti, and a dozen others. They sat across the table from President Okonkwo and his advisors, and they made their offer. We will recognize the independence of all coalition worlds, the lead negotiator said. We will end all economic sanctions. We will sign treaties guaranteeing free trade and free passage. In exchange, we ask only that humanity limit its expansion. No new colonies, no new alliances, no new interference in our internal affairs. Okonkwo listened carefully. It was a generous offer. By galactic standards, the old powers were willing to give up a great deal to stop the changes that threatened them, but it was not enough. Tell me, Okonkwo said quietly, what happens to the species still under your control? The ones who have not yet joined the coalition? Will they remain slaves? Will they continue to suffer? The negotiator shifted uncomfortably. Internal matters are the concern of each individual power. We cannot dictate how others treat their subjects. Then we have nothing to discuss. Okonkwo stood up from the table. Humanity did not come to the stars to build an empire. We came to make things better. Not just for ourselves, for everyone. If you are not willing to change how you treat your subjects, then we cannot make peace with you. You would risk war over this? The negotiator demanded. Over the fate of species you have never even met? Yes, Okonkwo replied simply. We would. The delegation returned to their masters with nothing. The old powers raged and threatened, but they did not attack. They had seen what the humans could do. They knew they could not win, and so the galaxy held its breath. The old order was dying, but it had not yet fallen. The new order was rising, but it had not yet won. Both sides watched each other across the void, waiting to see who would blink first. The humans did not blink. They continued building, continued helping, continued spreading their ideas of freedom and justice. They knew that time was on their side. Every day, the coalition grew stronger. Every day, the old powers grew weaker. Sooner or later, the balance would tip. Sooner or later, the old order would fall. And when it did, humanity would be there to help build something better. Not because they wanted power, not because they wanted glory, simply because it was the right thing to do. That was what the galaxy still did not understand. The humans were not conquerors. They were not empire builders. They were something far more dangerous. They were idealists. They believed in things like freedom and justice and equality. They believed that everyone deserved a chance to live in peace and dignity, and they were willing to do whatever it took to make that vision real. The old powers had faced many threats over the millennia. They had survived invasions and plagues and economic collapses, but they had never faced anything like this. They had never faced a species that wanted to change everything. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity really was, and nothing would ever be the same again. 50 years had passed since humanity first met the Valanthi. The galaxy was unrecognizable. Half the old empires had collapsed. Their former subjects had joined the coalition of free worlds, which now included over 500 species across 3,000 star systems. Trade routes that had once been controlled by ancient monopolies were now open to everyone. Slave markets that had operated for millennia had been shut down. The balance of power had shifted so dramatically that even the most optimistic human predictions had been exceeded. And still, humanity had not conquered anyone. Not a single species, not a single world. They had won by building, by helping, by showing that there was a better way to exist among the stars. The remaining old powers gathered in secret. They met on a neutral station far from any settled world, in a region of space that belonged to no one. 12 species sent their highest leaders: emperors, prime ministers, supreme counselors, and hive queens. Together, they represented the last remnants of the galactic order that had existed for countless thousands of years. Senator Vethka of the Olani, now ancient and tired, looked around the chamber at her fellow rulers. She had spent her entire career fighting the humans. She had watched every strategy fail. She had seen everything she believed in crumble to dust. "We have lost," she said simply. "It is time to accept this truth." The Valanthi Emperor slammed his fist on the table. "We have not lost. We still command powerful fleets. We still control wealthy worlds. We can fight." "Fight who?" Vethka asked wearily. "Fight the humans? We saw what happened to your fleet. We saw what happened to the hive mind. And that was 50 years ago. 50 years of human advancement. Do you think they have grown weaker since then? Then we fight the coalition," the Emperor insisted. "The humans protect them, but they cannot protect everyone at once. We strike their allies, force the humans to spread themselves thin. And then what?" a Mercanti trade lord asked. "Even if we won, what would we gain? Burned worlds and dead populations. The very subjects we hope to reclaim would be destroyed in the fighting." The chamber fell into bitter silence. They all knew the truth, even if they did not want to say it out loud. The old ways were finished. The question was not whether they would fall, but how. Vethka spoke again. "There is only one option left. We go to the humans and surrender. Not on a battlefield. At a negotiating table, we offer them everything they want, and we hope they are merciful." "Surrender?" the Emperor spat. "The Valanthi do not surrender. We have never surrendered in 40,000 years. Then the Valanthi will be the first to fall," Vethka replied coldly. "The rest of us will make peace while we still have something to offer." The debate continued for 3 days. Some refused to accept the reality of their situation. Others could not imagine a galaxy where they were not supreme. But in the end, necessity won over pride. The old powers agreed to send a delegation to Earth. They would ask for terms. The delegation arrived in human space 3 weeks later. 12 ships, each one carrying the most powerful ruler of its species. They were escorted by human warships through the solar system, past the colonies on Mars and the stations around Jupiter, until they reached Earth itself. President Maria Chen greeted them on the surface. She was the great-granddaughter of Admiral Chen Wei, who had turned back the hive mind half a century before. She had her ancestors' calm eyes and patient smile. She was 73 years old, and she had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. "Welcome to Earth," she said as the delegation stepped off their shuttles. "I hope your journey was comfortable." The Valanthi Emperor looked around at the blue sky and green trees with barely concealed contempt. This small world, with its primitive beauty, had brought the mightiest empires in the galaxy to their knees. He could not understand how. "We have come to discuss terms," he said stiffly. "Then let us discuss them," President Chen replied. She led them to a conference hall that had been prepared for the occasion. It was a simple room, with windows overlooking a garden. There were no symbols of power, no displays of wealth, no reminders of human military might. Just comfortable chairs and a table with water and refreshments. The delegates took their seats. President Chen sat across from them, with her advisors arranged behind her. She did not look triumphant or arrogant. She looked the way she always looked. Kind, patient, and utterly certain of what she wanted. Senator Vethka spoke first. "President Chen, we have come to acknowledge reality. The old order is dying. We cannot stop the changes sweeping the galaxy. We ask only for mercy. Spare our peoples. Allow us to maintain some dignity. We will give you whatever you want." "What do you think we want?" Chen asked quietly. The delegates looked at each other in confusion. This was not how negotiations usually worked. The victor made demands. The defeated agreed or faced destruction. That was how it had always been done. "We assumed you would want territory," Vethka said. "Resources, tribute, perhaps revenge for the wrongs we have done." "We want none of those things," Chen replied. The confusion deepened. "Then what do you want? Name your price. Take our territories. Accept our surrender. Just tell us what will make you stop." President Chen reached into her coat and withdrew a slim document. She placed it on the table in front of the delegates. It was written in simple language, translated into every major galactic tongue. "This is what we want," she said. "Not territory, not wealth, not revenge. Just this." Senator Vethka picked up the document with trembling hands. She read the title aloud. "The Universal Charter of Sentient Rights." "Read it," Chen encouraged. "Take your time." The delegates read. The document was not long, but every word carried weight. It established basic rights for all sentient beings, regardless of species. The right to life, the right to freedom, the right to speak and think and believe without fear, the right to participate in decisions that affected their lives, the right to be treated with dignity. This is impossible, the Valanthi Emperor said flatly. Our empire is built on hierarchy, on service, on the proper order of species. If we implement this charter, everything falls apart. Your empire is already falling apart, Chen replied. This charter does not destroy anything. It simply recognizes what has already become true. The oppressed will no longer submit. The slaves will no longer serve. You can fight this reality, or you can accept it, but you cannot change it. And if we refuse? Bethka asked. Chen's expression did not change. Then we continue as we have been. We help the oppressed. We shelter the refugees. We spread ideas of freedom wherever we go. Eventually, your empires collapse entirely, and your peoples are left to rebuild without any guidance or protection. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Or, she continued, you sign the charter. You begin reforms. You treat your subjects as equals, instead of servants, and in exchange, humanity offers something we have never offered anyone before. Partnership, full access to our technology, full membership in the coalition, full protection against any external threat. You would share your weapons? The Valanthi Emperor leaned forward, suddenly interested. The weapons that destroyed our fleet? The weapons that turned back the hive mind? Not weapons, Chen corrected. Technology. Medicine that can cure any disease. Energy systems that can power worlds forever. Construction methods that can build habitats in the void of space. We have developed wonders that could benefit every being in the galaxy. But we will not share them with empires built on suffering. The delegates were silent. They had come expecting demands for tribute and territory. Instead, they were being offered something far more valuable, but with conditions that challenged everything they believed. How do we know you will keep your word? Vethka asked. How do we know you will not use this charter to weaken us, then conquer us when we are vulnerable? Chen smiled gently. Senator, if we wanted to conquer you, we would have done it 50 years ago. We have the power. We have always had the power. We could have burned your worlds, enslaved your peoples, built an empire greater than any the galaxy has ever seen. We chose not to. We chose to help instead. We chose to build instead. We chose to wait until you were ready to change. Why? The Emperor demanded. Why would any species do this? What do you gain from helping others? Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Long ago, before we reached the stars, humans nearly destroyed ourselves. We had wars that killed millions. We had technologies that could have ended all life on our world. We came within a hair's breadth of extinction, more than once. But somehow, we survived. We learned. We grew. She looked at each delegate in turn, meeting their eyes. What we learned was this. The only way to truly win is to help everyone else win too. Empires built on oppression always fall. Economies built on exploitation always collapse. Only cooperation, only mutual benefit, only genuine respect for others leads to lasting prosperity. We did not come to the stars to repeat the mistakes of our past. We came to build something better, something that would last. A beautiful philosophy, the Emperor said, his voice dripping with contempt. But the galaxy is not a classroom. It is a battlefield. The strong take from the weak. That is the natural order. Perhaps it was. Chen agreed. But natural orders can change. Evolution does not stop. The universe is billions of years old, and it will exist for billions more. Who knows what the natural order will be 1,000,000 years from now? 1,000,000,000 years from now? We believe it can be something better than endless conflict. We believe intelligent beings can choose something different. She stood up from her chair and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was full of flowers from 100 different worlds, brought to Earth by the species humanity had helped. A living symbol of what cooperation could create. You have a choice, Chen said, her back to the delegates. You can cling to the old ways, watch your empires crumble, and be remembered as the last tyrants of a dying age, or you can embrace the future, join us in building something new, and be remembered as the leaders who had the courage to change. She turned back to face them. But know this. We will not stop. Whether you join us or oppose us, humanity will continue on its path. We will help the oppressed. We will shelter the refugees. We will spread freedom wherever we go. Nothing you do can prevent that. The only question is whether you will be part of the future or buried by it. The delegates requested time to consider. They were given private rooms and access to communication with their home governments. For 3 days, they debated among themselves and consulted with their advisors back home. Some argued for rejection. They could not imagine giving up power, even power that was already slipping away. They preferred to fight and lose than to surrender and survive. Others saw the opportunity. The humans were offering partnership, not domination. They were offering technology that could solve problems the old powers had struggled with for millennia. All they had to do was treat their subjects with basic decency. In the end, necessity won again. On the 4th day, the delegates gathered in the conference room. One by one, they signed the Universal Charter of Sentient Rights. Even the Valanthe Emperor signed, though his hand trembled with rage as he did so. President Chen watched each signature with quiet satisfaction. 50 years of work had led to this moment. 3 generations of humans had dedicated themselves to this goal. They had sacrificed and struggled and waited, knowing that one day the galaxy would be ready to change. That day had arrived. "Thank you," she said when the last signature was complete. "I know this was not easy. Change never is. But I promise you, the future will be worth it. Together, we will build something magnificent." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The old powers had signed the charter. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. On thousands of worlds, beings who had lived as slaves celebrated their freedom. Chains were broken. Prisons were opened. For the first time in their lives, billions of sentient creatures saw a future that was not defined by suffering. The coalition of free worlds expanded to include everyone. Former enemies became partners. Ancient grudges were set aside. The galaxy began the long process of healing from millennia of conflict and exploitation, and humanity continued to grow. Not through conquest, but through contribution. Human scientists shared their knowledge. Human engineers helped build new infrastructure. Human doctors healed the sick and taught others to heal. Human teachers spread ideas that had taken humanity thousands of years to learn. The final entry was made in the Galactic Codex, the great record of galactic civilization. It was written by the combined representatives of over 1,000 species, and it would be remembered forever. Sol system and all human territories are hereby declared off-limits to unauthorized contact, by order of the Galactic Senate, by request of no one. Violation is not prohibited. It is simply inadvisable. The humans do not forget. The humans do not forgive. But for those who choose peace, the humans will be the greatest friends the galaxy has ever known. Beneath the text, in 100 languages, a human phrase was inscribed: "We came in peace. We will leave you in peace. But never mistake our kindness for weakness." President Chen read the entry on the day it was published. She was sitting in her garden, surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds. She was old now, her hair white and her hands unsteady, but her eyes were still bright, and her smile was still warm. Her grandson sat beside her, a young man just beginning his career in the diplomatic corps. He had read the entry too, and he was bursting with questions. "Grandmother, why did they write it that way? It makes us sound dangerous." Chen laughed softly. "We are dangerous, child. We have weapons that can move stars. We have technologies that can reshape reality. Any species with such power is dangerous, but we would never use them aggressively. We only defend ourselves." True. But the galaxy needed to understand something important. Kindness is not the same as weakness. Mercy is not the same as helplessness. We could have conquered them all. We could have built the greatest empire the universe has ever seen. We chose not to. That choice makes us strong, not weak. She looked up at the sky, where starships moved against the blue like silver fish, swimming through an endless ocean. The old powers feared us because they could not understand us. They thought strength meant domination. They thought power meant control. They could not imagine a species that had the ability to rule everything and chose to rule nothing. "Do you think they understand now?" her grandson asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Some do. Some never will. The universe is vast. And there will always be those who believe that might makes right. But we have shown them another way. We have proven that cooperation can work, that kindness can be powerful, that the galaxy can be better than it was. She reached out and took her grandson's hand. That is our legacy, child. Not empire. Not conquest. Not fear. Hope. We gave the galaxy hope. And as long as that hope survives, everything we have done will have meaning. The years passed. President Chen died peacefully in her garden, surrounded by her family. She was mourned by a galaxy that had learned to love humans, even if they still did not fully understand them. But her work continued. Her grandchildren took up the cause, and their grandchildren after them, generation after generation of humans, working to make the galaxy a little better than they found it. The Codex entry remained, a permanent reminder of what humanity was: dangerous and kind, powerful and merciful, capable of destroying worlds but choosing to build them instead. And across the galaxy, species who had once trembled in fear now raised their children with stories about the humans. Stories about a small blue world that had said no to the masters of the stars. Stories about a species that had changed everything. Not through war, but through hope. They called it the human age. And it was only beginning. Far away, in the depths of space, the hive mind watched. It had waited for 50 years, growing stronger, learning from its mistakes. It had not forgotten the humans. It had not forgiven them. Someday, perhaps, it would return, but not today. Today, the humans were too strong. Today, the galaxy was united behind them. Today, there was hope, and against hope, even the hive mind could not prevail. The stars burned on, as they always had and always would. Civilizations rose and fell. Species were born and died. The universe continued its endless dance of creation and destruction. But on one small blue world, circling an ordinary yellow star, something special had happened. A species had reached for the stars and found something greater than power. They had found purpose, to help, to build, to hope. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and it would never be forgotten.